Mike, you ready? All right, well, welcome everyone to our work session today. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and our first item on the agenda is an update on the WeCycle program. So we're happy to have you both with us, and if you'll introduce yourselves to the record and go to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm G.R. Fielding. I'm the county engineer, and I'm here basically just to introduce Mirta from WeCycle, who's completed their second full year of operation. The county helped fund the startup of the program, and as part of that, we asked for a yearly update from WeCycle. So to do that is Mirta.
Wonderful, thank you, GR. And thanks to, hello to all of you, happy spring. It's biking season. We've had more requests to bring out the system early. So I was glad to see a little snow today to remind you that we're not quite ready to open. But I'm excited to give you some updates on what was our first full year of operations, our second season of WeCycle. And I know many of you are avid WeCyclers, so I'm eager to, let's just run with it.
Oh, cool.
There we go. It's the mustache.
Governor Hickenlooper riding on the first ever Colorado Bike Share Day. You can't see that. 171 days, 17,000 rides, 33,000 miles pedaled, 1 million calories burned, and 22,000 estimated pounds of carbon offset, and 76% growth in the second year.
That's huge.
And here's our founding partners. Fantastic. So you've all heard enough from me, so we're going to meet some of the personalities that make the WeCycle system happen for them to tell you why they enjoy it. Oh, perhaps. There it is. Okay.
Because it just made it so easy to get from our office building into Aspen to run errands. Use WeCycle, you'll really enjoy it.
Okay, yeah, they're all actually quite a few more. We can just keep it up. Okay, so great. So Nathan's a typical season pass holder. We had 465 season pass holders this year, which marked a significant increase, which was really exciting for us as a demonstration that this is a community and a program that is being used by our community. We're also really pleased to see the ratio between male and female. Our average rider is slightly younger than it was last year. Speaks to the next gen in this community, using bikes and being confident and comfortable with the shared economy. And what was most encouraging is 63% of our rides this year were made by our season pass holders. So this system is primarily being used by those of us who work, live, commute to town, and hence the rides are very short. 8 minutes long gets you where you need to be very quickly. Our day pass holder demographic is slightly different. We had approximately 2,100 of those from 943 different zip codes around the country.
Wow.
And they only made up 37% of our rides this year. And as you can see, their ride was a little bit longer. They don't know exactly where they're going. They're probably cruising, trying to find another station, exploring a little bit more with a 19-minute average ride time. These pass holders would use our 14 stations, which you can see are equally dispersed throughout the community. In orange in the upper left corner, you see the Gantt was a new sponsor and station this year. We did some optimization of where our stations were. Peaches City Hall was another one of our new locations this year, which proved to be very successful, as well as Hunter Creek. And then we tested a Truscott Aspen Golf Course station at the end of the season. Our station usage was very revealing. The Brewing Company, right on Restaurant Row, was our #1 station this year. with Pepke Park being second, Ruby Park being third. And what you can't quite see in the small text up on the screen is the peripheral stations tend to be less used because they are the feeder stations to the core. And then you can see kind of midway through the screen is Smuggler Centennial. You see there are more bikes leaving from the orange there than there are coming, which has an impact on our operations, as well as Aspen Valley Hospital has a higher number of bikes leaving from it rather than going to it. But Pepke Park and CP Berger are both important transit hubs. So let's learn a little bit more about that.
Can I ask a question while you're on that? So I can't, because I can't read this, but where does the MAA, the Institute,
Do we have any more?
lie in that?
The Meadows is the sixth busiest station.
Okay.
And I'm sorry this pointer's not working. And then the music tent you can see is the one on the far right. So Benedict Music Tent is actually the second from the right. That station is only operational for 8 weeks of the year.
And the Institute is 4th.
Oh, the Institute is 4th. Fantastic.
Yeah, and the Meadows is
Is
5th, 6th.
Sixth.
Okay.
So those stations are huge hubs of our system, not only from a visitor standpoint, but also in terms of locals going back and forth.
And my theory on the extensive use coming from the station, like Smuggler and the hospital, is because it's downhill from there, right?
Correct.
Because I see a lot of people in the mornings getting on those bikes, and the bus goes the opposite way, so they ride the bikes into town to work.
Which is
And then they
ideal
probably catch the
connection.
bus home. So it
Which is
works
perfect.
perfectly.
So let's see here if we can.
There he is again.
I'm wondering how we can see our. Sorry, there's the slight. I'm not sure where the mouse disappears to.
Yeah.
I'm going to try one thing here. Just 2 seconds. I'm going to see if we can view it in slideshow view, if that will make it easier to find our. Okay. Okay, here we go. So we're talking about transit, as Patty just brought up.
There you go. There you go.
I'm George Newman. I'm a Pittsburgh County Commissioner. As an avid rider of RAPT's PRT program, Recycle provides me the opportunity to go that last half mile. So when I get off the bus at Pepke Park, I pick up the bike and get on to my meeting for the day. So it's easy, it's convenient, and it's quick.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, it's perfect,
For
George.
being an avid rider. George is not alone. We have, of our riders, 32% of our riders are commuting to and from work on a weekly basis. 76% of those rides are taken during weekdays. And 30% are using it to avoid traffic and parking, exactly what our goals were as a system. What you're seeing here is that we have a 24/7 service. So we can see here in the middle of the day the commuting hours, which are here around 7 or 8 in the morning, and then we see another peak around 5 or 6 in the afternoon. The gray are our season pass holders, and the orange are our day pass holders. So you can see their time frame is more, the day pass holders' time frame is more condensed in the middle of the day, whereas season pass holders have a little bit more of the shoulder. This requires that WeCycle be available, our staff be operational, that we be moving bikes so we can respond to the needs of the system. What we find really exciting is that 3% of our rides actually occur in this window here when RAFTA is closed. So we're providing this bridge service between RAFTA's closure hours, and riders are able to rely on us when they can't get on a bus per se. We have a great connectivity to transit, with Pepke Park and Ruby Park being our two busiest stations, Pepke Park and Ruby Park being our second and third busiest stations. And 85% of our pass holders connect to transit on a regular basis, and 90% of them are regular transit users, which to us reconfirms this connectivity to transit. Let's hear from Ryland.
I love WeCycle because it basically gives me the freedom to use a bike when I need it and then forget about it when I don't. For example, today I'm going to ride the bike up to the hospital and go to work, and then after work I'm going to go down to a friend's place at Truscott.
So as we talked about, Ryland uses the bikes to commute, to get around independently without a car, which aligns with Aspen's goals. So 36% of our trips, according to pass holders, were replacing car trips, which we're very pleased with. And 47% of our riders are riding to do their part for the environment, as well as to stretch their legs and get a little bit of exercise. So this really furthers the goals that you have set forward in the Aspen Area Community Plan, which are to provide an efficient, multimodal, and integrated transportation system that not only reduces congestion and air pollution, but also leads to a healthier, more vibrant community. So we're pleased to see that happening. Let's hear it. Megan uses the bike in a different way.
My name is Megan, and I work at Rocky Mountain Institute, and I live here in Aspen, and I love to use the cycle bikes for one-way trips. For example, if I ride into town and then I can take the bus home, or if I get a ride somewhere, I have the option to just leave it point to point.
So you're starting to hear some themes that our riders like the independence of WeCycle. They like the spontaneity of WeCycle. They like that they don't have to be responsible for it when they're not there. Welcome, Steve.
Hi.
And what's really encouraging is 67% of our riders are using WeCycle to get into town on trips that they would not have taken otherwise. So town is congested. How are you going to get in? You don't know. You can't find a parking place. You know you have a parking place at one of the WeCycle stations, and so you hop on your bike. By having that spontaneity, though, has an impact on us, the operating staff. So there is a cost to balancing and keeping the stations open so that there are always docks for people to dock their bikes at. And it's important that we also have bikes available where people need them, such that we always know we need to have bikes at Smuggler early in the morning for those who are commuting into town. We see an interesting shift at Pepke Park in the morning as BRT buses arrive, the docks empty out. And we know that those bikes will be coming back in around 4 or 5 o'clock, so we need to make sure that the Pepke Park station has a little bit more capacity at that point. That clearly requires staff being on top of it, available, and there is a cost to having staff available that regularly. So we balanced about 2,400 bikes this year. Sharon uses the bikes in a little differently than some of us.
I'm Sharon, and I love WeCycle, even though I have my own bike. I especially love it at night. I take it to the Wheeler, and I can be dressed up, drop it off on Restaurant Row, and use the lights. And I also recently, since it's been so dark in the morning, I've taken it pitch black at 6:30 in the morning, and same thing. I have lights front and back, and it's very safe and easy, and I can drop it off anywhere.
37% of our rides were between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. So that's a shift from last year. The confidence of using the bikes at night. When the bars close, we see a shift and an increase in utilization of the bikes. They're being used for social events and entertainment. We're also seeing a lot of quick, spontaneous trips to run to the grocery store to get some food. We hear a lot from the Hunter Creekers. I had to run down to Clark's to be able to get a gallon of milk. And as Sharon also mentioned, she owns her own bike. She is aligned with 91% of our riders who own bikes, perhaps mountain bikes, road bikes, townies, but you don't always want to be taking your bike around with you. You might want to leave it, come into town, do something else, and not have to remember to go back and get your bike and change your schedule accordingly. So we provide that flexibility, and that pattern is being reinforced. All right, Chris.
I love WeCycle. I live up in Snowden, so I get to drive or take the bus down here. And then I hop on a WeCycle, cruise around town, run errands, go to meetings with clients. It's just really convenient, it's fast, it's easy, really affordable. Rather than fixing your own flat tire, WeCycle takes care of the maintenance and just keeps the bikes running.
So Chris is like a third of our pass holders living outside of the 81611, 81612 zip codes. This is an increase from last year, which we're really encouraged to see, because our goal really is the more riders we can have riding RAFTA into Aspen and using WeCycle as their wheels and independence within Aspen, we're also going to be collectively reducing that congestion that is back in full force in the mornings coming into town. So we're encouraged by this pattern. The other interesting thing that Chris mentioned was WeCycle's affordable. WeCycle passes, hopefully you all have your keys and are ready to soon use it, are $50 for the full season. That gives you access to as many rides as you would like for 30 minutes at a time, and it's affordable because we have incredible support. This year, 45% of our revenue came from sponsorship, 21% from pass sales and overtime fees, and donations and grants made up a very important part of our revenue stream this year. And we were grateful for those organizations and individuals that understand the importance of multimodal transportation to help get us going in our second year here. So we were pleased to have not only a 76% growth in ridership, but a 33% growth in our revenue this year. Our presenting sponsors with whom we couldn't have operated such a great season without were Aspen Sotheby's and Related on respective sides of the fenders. We can't thank you enough for being our founding partners and having believed in getting the system on the ground and rolling such that all of these individuals you've met today are able to use the bike and integrate it into their daily lives. And to our many sponsors, we had 52 sponsors and partners this year from a wide range of this community and some national partners as well. They are on both baskets and on map panels. As you can see with our media sponsors here, we introduced map panels on the left-hand side this year. It's a great way to engage, show your alignment with a sustainable form of transportation. And to many of our collaborators who help promote the program and get involved and encourage ridership. So without this support, we wouldn't be able to get to where we were this year, which was $217,000 of income, and our expenses were $224,000, which was a 36% increase in expenses, so pretty much aligned with our income, which we're pleased with. We did have a net loss of $7,000, but I'm confident that we can make that up in coming years with more ridership, more pass sales, and just a few more sponsors aligning themselves with the WeCycle program. So it's within reach if you think of engagement of the pass holders and the business community. I'm confident that we can get there. This will really be our baseline for moving forward since this was our first full year of operations as an organization. So what are our next steps? We are eager for financial reasons as well as engagement reasons to grow our ridership, both our season and day pass holders. We're eager to expand our service area as well as our demographic so that we can serve people better. We're looking to secure multi-year partnerships and sponsors so there's more predictability and sustainability to the program. And we're looking to magnify our impact. Let's hear about the importance of expanding this system.
I'm Steve Scadron, mayor of Aspen. I ride WeCycle all the time, far more than I expected to, because I'm a town bike. But WeCycle made it really easy for me because there's a station outside where I live near Hunter Creek, there's a station outside City Hall right here, and there's a station right by City Market, and I ride all the time between those stations. So I love WeCycle.
So what Steve mentioned is really important. If stations are not within 300 feet of where you're trying to, or 300 yards, excuse me, of where you're trying to go, we find that the usage isn't optimized and isn't realized. So this year we had a station at City Hall, as Steve mentioned, and that station proved to be very successful, being our 5th busiest station, a block away from our busiest station at the Brewing Company. City employees engaged with WeCycle this year in a way they would never have before. They're amongst some of our Century Club riders, those who rode over 100 times. And so it's really important we hear from our riders in our season pass survey, why didn't you ride? And the reasons that individuals don't ride is because there's not a station close to where they're going, and there's not a station where they're coming from. And so amongst our pass holder survey, the 2 most requested stations to kind of fill a service gap for this year were 8th Street as number 1 and the Red Brick for number 2. Truscott was number 3. Interesting, 8th Street is the first BRT stop coming into Aspen. It connects to the hospital, to the schools, to the Meadows. And the Meadows, as a commitment to making the station a reality, has committed to fund half of that station. And we are looking for a sponsor for the other half to make that station a reality this year. Similarly, the Red Brick was our 2nd most requested station, and the Red Brick Council for the Arts has agreed to fund half of that station if we're able to secure funding for the other half of that station. So we're trying to fill a few of these gaps for our riders. I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but we're doing our best. We're also diversifying our ridership this year, which we're really excited about. We received a grant from the New Belgium Brewing Company as well as from the Thrift Shop for Translation to launch Movimiento en Bici program this year. We're looking to reach 40 Latina riders and from a health and wellness perspective as well as from a transit, mobility, and independence. We're looking forward to launching this program with some partners, and we'll keep you posted on this exciting development. And then how can we magnify our impact? How can we really have that opportunity where we are removing single occupancy vehicles from Highway 82? And so we have made progress since we last talked to you about how can WeCycle be part of a valley-wide system, intimately connected to the BRT system. We are already aligned with RAFTA. I'm really excited to share with you that Basalt, Carbondale, and Glenwood have all approached us, and we are working with them in conversations as to how we can have WeCycle systems within these various communities aligned with their bike and ped plans as well as to achieve their transportation goals. And so the vision would be that in a few years there would be one pass, one system throughout the valley. We surveyed our pass holders and asked them if this was something they were interested in. It was remarkable. 78% of our riders said that one would ride in other towns in the Roarenburg Valley if had access to WeCycle. And more encouraging was that 85% would be more inclined to ride RAFTA if one had access to WeCycle at either end. No need to drive, rather than driving your car to the park and ride and then waiting for a bus. Once you're in your car, you're more inclined just to drive up Valley. So where we can really magnify our impact as WeCycle is once we become a Valley-wide system. And this is taking place nationwide. There's some very successful regional systems. The Cabby system in the DC area, the Bay Area Bike Share is demonstrated here on the right, as well as the Hubway system up in the Boston area. And so we are learning from the other systems. There are about 50 programs in the United States at this point. We are still the only small town bike share in North America. And we are taking best practices and applying them to our program. But what's really exciting is that we're also impacting how others go and ride in other communities.
So I'm an avid city biker in New York City, but I never would have signed up for that had I not started here in Aspen. WeCycle was much more approachable for me because I hadn't been on a bike in about a decade. So it was easy for me to jump on here and navigate to and from Aspen. And once I found out how easy that was, I immediately went home and signed up for City Bike in New York.
It sparked my interest in using the new bike share that we have in my city, in Chicago. So
I am obsessed with WeCycle. This is such a fantastic service, and I cannot wait until it comes to San Francisco.
This is so awesome. I am on the WeCycle in Aspen, and I'm going back to Boston and hook up with my Hubway and do this every day and be a bike share member. I'm so excited.
It's a really a great idea, this one for Aspen. And hopefully in Bologna, in Italy, we could do that in the future. Why not? It's very useful.
Had a great ride down. You've got 2 Texas converts to bike riding.
We're now we people as we go back to Texas.
So we've made a lot of We People, and that's thanks to you and your partnership in helping make this program a success. And I hope that we can continue to work together in different ways and collaborate and partner, be it on a level of all of you riding. We have many avid riders amongst yourselves. County employees riding for health and wellness purposes, from funding opportunities to helping this program solidify and grow and demonstrating your leadership, be it CMAQ, air quality funds, grants. And most importantly, that we can put a roadmap together as how we can be successful and sustainable and work together so that we can little by little pedal ourselves to that clean air and that beautiful place we enjoy living. So thank you all very much, and I'm eager for your questions.
Very nice. Steve, I'll turn it back over to you now you're here.
So I had a couple questions. Well, I was just picturing what it would be like if you had a station in Glenwood. Because if you ride the BRT down there and you get dropped off at the 27th Street station in Glenwood, that would be one place you would absolutely have to have a WeCycle station. But then I was thinking like at the pool, downtown, at the pool, and at the rec center would all be good locations to have things. Because I've walked to all those destinations from 27th Street at one time or another.
That's quite a walk.
Walking through Glenwood is not very easy or pleasant sometimes. And it would be great. Then in Carbondale, I was thinking the park and ride is the parking lot is full of cars, and if there was a WeCycle even from downtown to the park and ride in Carbondale, I think a lot of Carbondale people would probably ride the bicycle out there and park their car somewhere in town or walk to the WeCycle in town or something. I think that would be very successful there. So I was just trying to visualize in the different locations how somebody could make use of it.
Those are all really good ideas, and I think in order to scope where those stations would need to be, we'll be doing outreach within the various jurisdictions and communities to understand where the patterns are. Because as you say, they need to be where they're needed in order to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for the update. It really is inspiring, and it was your and your team's foresight that really brought this to our community, so appreciate that. I guess what I'm wondering is, do the sponsors from the previous year seem to be satisfied with the exposure, and are you having good sign-ups with sponsorship again for this year's budget?
Yeah, great question. So Sotheby's was our presenting sponsor our first year, and they came on our second year. And I'm looking forward to announcing our news about our third year coming up. But Sotheby's will be joining us again this year, which we're thrilled about. And we have had great retention on our sponsorship level. I think our big challenge from a sponsorship side of things is we had anticipated larger numbers than we've been able to acquire. And so little, by proving more ridership, more exposure, I think we'll be able to solidify those numbers and hopefully grow them with time.
Okay. And then this is a small potential follow-up for you, but it has struck me that a lot of large employers in town really do ever more so have health benefit programs for the employees, trying to improve their general health. And I've known some that offer rewards to people, and perhaps a reward would be a WeCycle pass, and perhaps you can offer some bulk discount for large employers who would use those as rewards for their employees. Might be a way to push the membership program.
Great idea. Get lots of people riding.
Get lots of people riding, lots of people healthy. Thank you.
George.
Mirta, I like the idea of the two additional stations. My question is, on the 8th Street station, where would that be located? And it seems like that's for me, there's a safety concern there, because depending on the route that those riders will then take, will they end up having to cross 82 again at that dangerous intersection, or navigate the S-curves, or would they be trying to use the back streets? I mean, that's...
As you know, Castle Creek Bridge corridor is a hot discussion item right currently. And so we are very sensitive to the safety and dynamic of cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists in that area. Last year, the Parks Department and Transportation put a bike rack kind of on the 8th Street side, just west of Poppies, as heading north there. And so that would be the location that we've worked with both engineering and parks to approve a station location there. It would have bollards around it, and cyclists would be directed to either go through the west end or to cross at the pedestrian crosswalk. I think as that area gets more solidified in terms of what its future is, we're working with those partners to helpfully integrate a WeCycle station into that spot, because we see that as, if it doesn't happen this year, it's a critical location, and safety is important, for sure.
Thanks.
Welcome.
How much is a season pass?
$50.
How many rides is that good for?
As many as you like for the entire 6-month period of the season. So we had our top rider we had 3 riders ride over 300 times this past year. Those rides vary in around average 8 minutes. But we have all other riders who used it maybe once a week, others who used it when they just felt like it. So you really can use it as often or as little as you like.
$50 for 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And if you go over, then you incur overtime. If you go over your 30 minutes, then you incur overtime fees, which are designed to discourage you from keeping the bike for a long period of time, because at that point it's no longer bike sharing. So we've had great success with that. 93% of our rides are under 30 minutes, which is exactly what the intention of the program is. But as a result, we're not making as much money on people keeping bikes longer than 30 minutes, which definitely has an impact on our income statement.
Last year, I believe you did a pass program with ski company employees. Mm-hmm. Now, did they get it for half price if they were a ski company employee? Did the ski company pitch in any money for their employees that signed up?
Unfortunately, so the ski company is a founding partner.
Right.
And founding partners, thanks to believing in the system from the get-go, we would not be on the ground without our founding partners, receive discounted passes, as do all county employees. And each partner helps offset the cost for their employees as they choose. So the Aspen Meadows, if you rode over 25 times, the cost of your pass was fully reimbursed by the Meadows. The ski company didn't have anything of that nature, but we're hoping that we can work with more partners. The hospital did a similar program the year before, and we're looking to, the Aspen Institute actually bought passes for all of their employees this year.
Wow.
And so we're hoping that we can engage the county on that level, as well as all of our founding partners more this coming year.
So the ski company will do that every year. So, because I know my kids signed up at the Young Professionals event with you, and I don't know how much they used it. They were trying to use it when they came into town, and I don't think they knew about the smuggler one, which is right up the street. But I know they rode from point to point in town. So it's just a great opportunity. Yeah, and it's fun to see the people jumping on the bikes in the morning and heading down the hill from, usually late for work. Oh God, pedaling downhill fast.
Well, I just want to follow up on your employer comment. Interestingly, we asked our pass holders, how do you learn about WeCycle? and 90% of our pass holders learn through their employers.
Wow.
And so we're committed to working with employers, to Rachel's point as well, that we really believe employers offer transportation packages and health packages, and throughout the country, bike share is being integrated into those benefit packages at employers, and we hope that Aspen can really adopt that same model.
That's great. It was a great presentation.
So I'm looking forward to another summer of we-cycling. And to me, we-cycling is like a generic word like Kleenex, because when I see the we-cycle stations in Denver, I call them we-cycle, and they have some different name there. But in my mind, they're all we-cycle all across the whole country.
Just like the people from Texas, we people.
The we people, I love that one.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it, and see you on bikes within a month
Thanks.
or so here, or 2 months. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a broadband needs assessment phase 1, and Kara is here to present that to us.
Okay, so as I believe you are all aware, in 2012 on the ballot initiative, we asked the voters if we could use some of the translator funds to research broadband and cell expansion. And we've been working on efforts for that over the past year, and then last fall we released an RFP, and the original intent of that RFP was to try and do a network design in architecture, and as we interviewed different firms, it became very clear that probably the best step was to take a step backwards and to really do a needs assessment and financial model to really understand what the broadband needs are, not only of Pitkin County, but the entire Roaring Fork watershed. So I'm very happy to say that that is now moving, and we are about to launch a survey, a statistically valid survey. It's going to go out beginning on March 31st, and the point of that is really the first step in this needs assessment. It's a robust survey of about 30 questions to identify what residents' needs are for broadband. Do they have it? How much high speed do they really need? How much would they be willing to pay for? What kind of model would they like to see the county try and support? And so that will be interesting to see how they respond, and then that will help lead into the actual needs assessment financial model that our consultants will present with us at the beginning of June, and that will then lead into phase 2. So I just wanted to present this to you to really kind of kick off the launch of this broadband effort. I know we've been working on it for a long time behind the scenes, and now it's about to, with the survey going out, it's going to, we're reaching out to, what's the number, 1,600 households in the 4 different districts that we identified, and so it's also stretching across the 4 different counties, because we definitely realize this is much more than just Pitkin County. To get up to the Frying Pan, you have to go through Eagle County. To get to Gunnison, or to get to Marble, you know, they can't really do a hop over the Raggeds. It makes more sense to go through Redstone, and then also just the connection to Carbondale as well, and so the lower parts of Garfield County. And so we created a database that actually extends beyond Pitkin County and into the entire Roaring Fork watershed, and the 4 different districts, it's 1,600 residents or something, are going to be receiving the survey, and so we're hoping for a 14 or 15% response rate to really help guide then the next steps of this broadband plan.
So did we then, as part of the RFP process, did we contract with somebody who's then going through this needs assessment with us? So that's moving forward as part of our stepping back. Yep. We're moving forward with that.
Yep,
okay.
And they are actually going to be here on April 7th, I believe, to actually present, give you their entire presentation.
The other thing I'm going to add, Kara, is if she's aware of this, and I just need to bring the board up to speed on this, CCI is looking for a representative to represent CCI on the FirstNet Colorado Governing Board. FirstNet is the federal program to create interoperability between all jurisdictions for public safety. Kara's helping me draft a letter of interest, but before I send it off, I will seek the board's support in doing that. I have already outreached and got support from the local public safety, all the fire departments, the police chief, and the sheriff garnered their support for me to be working on this committee. It'd be a great asset, not only for the counties of Colorado, but for Pitkin County in this broadband effort.
Absolutely.
George, and then Michael.
It makes sense that we want to include and look at some of our neighboring counties and municipalities or towns. But will that survey actually go out to them, or is the survey going to focus specifically on Pitkin County residents within these 4 areas, geographic areas?
We are doing, because of the way we laid it out, we kind of copied the same zip code identification that we used in the community survey last year. And the way that lays out, it's not within the zip code, it's just a random sample with obviously the biggest piece going to Pitkin County residents, but it is also including a random sample from those in the other localities as well. And it's just within the watershed pieces.
So Georgia, when we did the community survey, we were able to eliminate addresses or respondents who are outside Pitkin County, but because the infrastructure that will eventually hopefully be participating in will necessarily probably have to run through these counties, we thought it would be appropriate to include responses from residents who may also benefit, so we understand what might be the right kind of model or such to encourage those communities to participate, whether they're in Pitkin County or not. But clearly the majority is going to be within Pitkin County.
So then, it's probably too early to tell, but at some point, when one of the questions is how much are you willing to pay?
Right.
That may vary between the different areas, and right now, because Pitkin County residents pay a mill levy for the translator, which provides free TV and free radio access, would that possibly be one source of funding for Pitkin County residents to access broadband?
Well, I think we probably need to see the design first to see how it would work, but one, in terms of competing for grants, multi-jurisdiction proposals are typically going to be more competitive, so we may have an advantage there. Yes, we will be looking at the use of translator funds, both to contribute to design and construction eventually for capital investment. Frankly, what we suspect is that the capital investment is going to exceed the capacity of that fund overall, and so we're going to need to supplement with grant revenues and also fee kind of revenues and such. And so that is the model that we will end up with at the end of the day, to come back to you and say, well, here's what we think we need to build. Here is what it would cost, and here are potential funding sources and mixes, and then we can talk about the equity of different areas and such.
And so would that be phase 2?
Yes.
That would be phase 2.
And maybe some of phase 3. And we have also reached out to staff and some elected officials in the different counties, and they all are very supportive. We are just a step ahead, so some of them are also writing the scope of their needs assessment, and I don't envision that phase 2 or anything down the line will fall into only Pitkin County's lap, because the other counties also recognize this is a big issue, and as much as we can collaborate together and find economies of scale too.
And then do we have any ending timeline in terms of when we may actually see broadband be available to those areas that don't receive it or receive it very slowly?
I think a lot of that will come out of this phase one to see, so phase one is the needs assessment, and then phase two is going to be that network architecture, as well as identifying what's kind of the low-hanging fruit what's the low-hanging fruit and the places that we've prioritized to try and get to as soon as possible.
Michael?
John, when do we make this a priority? When did the BOCC make this a priority?
2012.
And I thought at that time the need was self-evident. I don't understand why we're at 2015 with the needs assessment when the needs was self-evident in 2012. I don't get where we are.
Well, Michael, I think the needs assessment is maybe a bit more technical exercise than us identifying that, yes, broadband is desirable. The needs assessment will go into looking at both the feasibility and business models that are feasible to support the infrastructure that we need to build to provide broadband. And so it's going to be a more technical look than us understanding that yes, cell and broadband are desires of the community. We do know that. We've demonstrated that both through, I think, this board's representation of that community's interest, as well as through our citizen attitude surveys. That does not tell us what a feasible business model is for, where we don't know where we need to build what type of infrastructure and what kind of payment mixes we can put together to support it. And so what this is going to back up and do is really give us a more detailed assessment. We focused initially after 2012 on the opportunities to expand cellular service and broadband through cellular service, and we did complete a study and some engineering studies to identify locations. We've contracted with a tower company. What's really kind of, I think, stalled out is us not having a complete enough understanding, not just of that technical side and the desire for cell service, but where the market would help us deliver that infrastructure. And so we haven't seen as much cell towers built on those locations. We know where they need to go. We know that there's a strong desire for that service, but we didn't complete the rest of the analysis to understand where would the private sector then also make investments so that that infrastructure development was feasible. That's why when we looked at the hard line, the middle mile portion, so the fiber portion, we're taking a step back to understand that a little bit better first before we go into design.
Well, I'm glad we're doing that. It just seems like it's 3 years too late. I mean, the problem with the technology is that it advances so fast that our approach to sort of plodding along just won't keep up with it. So by the time we arrive at any conclusions, the technology's changed again. And the other thing the needs assessment doesn't cover, and one of the points that I brought up was that the visitors to Aspen are the people who expect to have communications when they come here. They come here to get away, to ski, to rest, to recreate, but they need to be in touch. So this survey doesn't sound like it's going to touch them at all. And that's essential for our competitiveness as a resort community, that people come here, can get away and be in touch all at the same time. So I don't understand why that survey is helping us.
Because the areas, so we have a good relationship with SkiCo, and we've got a good handle. That is where most of our visitor base is going, as well as we know that they are going to Maroon Bells. We know that they're going to the end of Castle Creek, and so we've established the relationships with the entities that are serving those areas. Where we have also established goals for extending broadband, Redstone, up the Frying Pan, even going east of Aspen to a certain degree, Old Snowmass. Those are not necessarily areas that would be heavily impacted by visitors. Those areas, when you extend infrastructure, are mainly going to serve residents. And so we have to have an understanding, if we're going to extend infrastructure up there, what that infrastructure is going to look like and how it would be supported, or we won't have a feasible model.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the reason we don't have cell service, quite frankly, we just don't have density.
Right.
And we don't have density and we have bad geography. And so it's really for us to do our bootstrap kind of operation here and not rely on the private sector, because they're just not going to support this incredibly low density of population. They'll do it in cities, it's not a problem, but they're not going to do it here. So we have to be farther along on our own.
Could I just respond to that one time? And the rub there, Michael, is we don't provide cell. We don't provide internet. We're prohibited by state law from doing so. And so without a specific vote. And so we are looking at ways that we can partner with the private sector in order to provide those services.
Rachel?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, if that's on the last.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just so you're aware, also part of this needs assessment, the consultants are also meeting with anchor institutions, community stakeholders. So it's not just the citizens, but who are those private businesses in town? The number one on their list is SkiCo, and that we recognize that we have to partner with SkiCo as well. So that's the other part of this phase one too, to address your concerns.
Okay, so what I'm getting is that the survey is only part of the needs assessment.
That's
that the other parts are developing a viable business formula. You know, I wish this was going faster too. I mean, who wouldn't? I wish the airport was going faster. I wish any number of projects that have a lot of process were going faster. But I think the very statement that by the time we're done with one study, the technology has changed, is a good sign that we haven't invested in the wrong technology as it changes. You know, it is a very rapidly changing environment. And there's a lot that's going on right now, so I'll just kind of weigh in on a few of the things that were raised. I think there's a lot of value in having some data survey from people in the Roaring Fork Valley who are not Pickens County residents. It can only help build coalitions with our other counties to give them the very information that they need about what their residents are experiencing in these areas, even if it's just a snapshot of a few of them. It will be valuable, and regional and joint efforts are much more likely to receive support from the state. So I'm totally down with that. You know, I think our funds are going to be valuable to be used as local match to be able to pull down either federal or state grants. I certainly don't see us getting into a place of individual subsidy for the cost of service. So finding out what people are willing to pay for their service is going to be really important. You know, in the discussion that's happening at the Capitol and perhaps nationally, it's important to bear in mind that the term utility has become very highly charged. And so, you know, I noticed that your memo supported this as infrastructure, which it is. It's community infrastructure. Some people are saying that this is as important as a utility as electric service or REAs or things like that that should be therefore regulated. So the term utility really raises a lot of angst and politically, as opposed to just keeping it as infrastructure with the new net neutrality rules and everything like that. There's also a lot of controversy over the Department of Local Affairs grants because there's still a lot of concern about whether that revenue is being rated from the federal mineral lease revenue fund that should be going towards impacted communities that are having the impacts. And so I hear disputes back and forth on that. We're not going to have to get involved in that. The grant program will either stand on its own or it won't. But there is a lot of controversy over whether it's a legitimate use of funds through DOLA. But that's nothing to do with the nationals. And I think that we should plan as a board for the potential of needing a November vote if the legislation that doesn't allow a vote doesn't pass or allows you to move forward without a vote. A lot of other counties have done this, and it's really tricky because I've heard some have just asked, can the county invest in broadband, yes or no? Others are laying cable or fiber, and then hoping someone will take over the system. And I think that's the most important part about this assessment and business model is we don't invest money. We're not going to become an IPS. We're not going to become an internet provider service. That's been a stated goal from day one, that we're not going to be a new Rothenthal. We're not going to be, we're going to try to work with the private sector to provide this service through what we can do with the appropriate infrastructure, whether it's just siting or whether it's contributing towards towers in key locations where there's low populations. It's not unique to have the geography problems and the population problems that Pickens County has. Maybe a lot flatter out in Mesa County, but you talk to them and you get outside of Grand Junction and the rolling hills and the foothill areas and things like that are just as troublesome as really large mountains and low population. So everybody's dealing with the same thing. Everyone's very disappointed. From the Club 20 original meeting to kind of the current, you hear of businesses just leaving Delta because they can't get high-speed service, or people having to go over 133 down to Carbondale to get enough bandwidth to upload documents to go back to work in Delta, or Paonia, these towns. It's just really horrible, and it's an economic problem. Cortez is suffering. A lot of these communities are suffering, and they're all going, what happened? 10 years ago, we were promised that there was going to be so many internet providers coming in to take care of this business that we were not by law to be in the business ourselves. That they didn't want that private competition. So the landscape is kind of slowly changing, but I am not sure about whether we will get something to pass at CCI. I think we should plan on a vote similar to other communities have had to get out from 152 if we need to. And there is going to be an April 7th call-in at Club 20, which is during our Tuesday meeting of first week of April, about what their position is going to be on the on the new bill. So we need to have some, we've been communicating, it might be something I step out of that work session for a little bit as well. But I think we're proceeding both cautiously, as we should be with taxpayer dollars, and thoroughly. And we're getting a plan together that when we do present it to business community, it's not going to be pie in the sky. And that's what matters. There are, and the industry will use multiple examples of communities that went into it and built the wrong system, and then no private sector provider was willing to take it over or to use it. It's like a subdivision that hooks up with bad water lines and then asks the city utility to pick up the water lines, and they say, well, not until you replace all those bad pipes that are too low and badly fitted and so on and so forth. So that's exactly what the industry uses to tell the State House and the State Senate, don't let these governments get involved, don't let them help their citizens. Look at we're saving the taxpayers money from failed systems like so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And they have lots of examples of governments that went into it, not fully prepared and made mistakes with taxpayer dollars. And so I'm much more comfortable with this approach and being thorough than why haven't we done it yesterday? It is a changing technology. It's changing laws. There's changing state laws and there's changing federal laws, so, and changing public expectations. So I want to make sure we're providing for the future, not just trying to catch up with the past.
Can I just tag on? Rachel, would you, it was one of my questions for later, but since we're here, what is the status of a bill, a broadband bill, or the bill that we were hoping was going to come out?
I think they have what they call late bill status, so they're allowed to enter it in late. I think a title's been reserved. They're still talking to various commissioners about sponsorship. And Eric talked about it at the end of the CCI meeting. Maybe Steve's memory is sharper than mine, but it was still a little vague. It was about what the bill will do as opposed to the language of the bill itself. And that's where the federal mineral lease dollars of the DOLA program came up. People, it was announced to say that this bill will march in lockstep with the DOLA program, and everybody who gets federal mineral lease is like, don't tie that to it, or it's going to go down in flames, because it may be available for any other grant program.
So it's still in the works. It just hasn't been cooked enough.
They're talking to Diane Mitch Bush. I think they're talking to other potential sponsors for sponsorship.
They didn't have sponsors lined up yet, although they are talking to people.
So it's still
they've been doing a lot of working with industry to try to make sure it's not a bill that's fought.
They're really working on vetting the bill more, and it's getting late in the session really at this point, and who knows, maybe it's one that comes back next year if they don't get to it this year. But.
Well, and the other key thing I think we need to, which is a good thing I think for us being members of Northwest COG, is Northwest COG's activity on broadband. And Nate has been really good and looking at funding. We're going to be talking about that more on Thursday. Yeah. So that's a real positive for us as far as looking at opportunities and possible DOLA grants at some point down the line to help us with some of our current infrastructure needs and our need to do some significant maintenance on our existing tower sites.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Region 10 has been active and will probably be in on the Club 20 conference call because they're a key player to have their support or at least neutrality on this bill. It would be great to get Northwest Council of Governments to also call in on that because they represent a number of governments who are Club 20 members.
Will you give me the specifics? I can take it Thursday to the meeting.
I have it.
That'd be perfect. Well, we'll talk again. Perfect.
Yeah, because, you know, Eagle, Summit, you know,
it's that whole core.
A number of those are all members of Club 20, Jackson.
Well, and other counties have jumped in on it. Route counties jumped in on it. Did Rio Blanco jump in? And there's another county. So 3 counties outside of the 5 Northwest Colorado Council of Government counties have jumped in on the broadband wagon.
Yeah. The other kind of element at CCI is that last year they had a number of bills related to how to repurpose the hard-to-serve telephone fund towards broadband. So a lot of the legislators are kind of like, well, we did broadband last year. You know, we got it all fixed. And so it's been a little harder to find someone to carry the rest of the problem. So they had a little fatigue on broadband hearings.
Great.
George?
Karen, back to the survey. I just noticed reading your our memo that citizens who are not selected as part of the random survey will be encouraged to participate in the process through Pick and Connect.
Yes.
And also we'll have another site, broadband@pickandcounty.com.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I spoke with Pat a little bit about that, and I think timing-wise, what we're going to do is set up Pick and Connect. So the survey is going to close on April 24th, and we've heard just, you know, since I've been here, just citizens kind of coming up and wanting to speak about it, and we didn't want to feel that people that weren't selected couldn't have a voice. So the same website that we've been using for the airport will set up a question and promote that as well to have anyone to fill out just so we can collect even more information. So that will be set up kind of towards the end of this random survey just so that they aren't competing with each other because the random survey has to be paper. And then throughout this whole process we've set up the broadband@pickandcounty.com and a specific phone line that I will be updating just as I work with the consultants, any information they have, whatever we're learning, because I know that there is some interest and want to make sure that everyone can be informed.
We have one member of the public here who I would like to call on to speak, and that's Kevin Ward, who's on the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, and he's also done a lot of work on broadband things. So Kevin, we got about 3 minutes, and if you could say everything in 3 minutes, that'd be good.
Well, first of all, I'm going back to Mike's point that 2 years ago we took this on. We formed a broadband coalition. We went about it very systematically. We got RF engineers to get 4 million data points from Redstone through Aspen everywhere. We determined where the holes were, how to cover them, and I don't know if you're aware of the economics of how this works, but if you build it, they won't necessarily come. That's what Rachel was talking about. However, we know that, and we knew that then, and there are currently companies that have great relationships with the carriers who check in advance. If we build this, will you come? And once they get the green light, they build them. This is American Tower and Crown Castle and a place called, an outfit called Continent. So these network builders have the pre-green light. So there is no danger of this going quickly and falling into a deep hole. It is pre-approved by the, if you build this mall, we will put our store in it. Okay, that was laid out. I'm just speaking as an old Snowmass resident and as the Internet Caucus representative, saying, we're ready to do this ourselves because the economics is not a problem. The engineering is not a problem. We already have the 4 million data points. We've got the guys at ComNet to do it. And I think the danger is doing more studies. I'm just saying that because I feel like we had an enormous amount of data. We had a coalition of SCICO, Pitkin County, BLM, the Forest Service. There was nobody, RAFTA, there was nobody not in our coalition. And, we kind of pushed the rock to the top of the hill and all it needed was a push to go down. And now we're back doing, surveys. And I would say look at the 4 million data points that the RF engineering company delivered us. And
did that cover the whole county or just Old Snow? So that covered the whole county. We just got a letter here too from Janet Razak about Snowmass, Old Snow.
Well, I'd be happy to comment on that because we actually worked on that together, and that's exactly why we're stepping back, because we did do this RF analysis. We did collect these 4 million data points. Based on that, we did contract with American Towers to build out that infrastructure upon them having that green light that Kevin's talking about. And as Kevin will tell you now, he still doesn't have cell service at his house. And so what we learned from that experience was the gap we were missing was this business needs assessment and really understanding the feasibility of that infrastructure moving forward in these private-public partnerships. If the county went out and built all of this infrastructure, one, we don't have the horsepower without an additional tax question at this point, I think, to do that. And then there's a question of, so what then? Because we, as Kevin pointed out, we have this information out there, we've contracted based on it. We have not been able to, we have some towers that the board's seen come forward. We're missing some of the middle mile backhaul right now and some of the fiber infrastructure. We understand that we're going to need to participate in that. But again, we want to have an understanding of what is feasible and wanted on the business side so we understand how to design that infrastructure. And that is a step, quite frankly, I think members of the Broadband Coalition would acknowledge we missed in that first step, and that's why we haven't seen as much activity based on that effort over the past 2 years.
So I see that this phase 1 is anticipated to be done by June 2015.
Yep.
So it's fairly quick survey. Just out of curiosity, what percentage of the total population do you anticipate will be hit by the random survey?
We're sending out 1,600 to each of the 4 different districts. So I think once they cleaned up the database, they had about 16,000 households. So 1,600 times 4, help me with my math a little bit. And then they're hoping to get 200 to 300, ideally more, but 200 to 300 in each of the 4 different districts for that initial.
So just out of curiosity, I know there's a big concern in the Snowmass Capitol Creek area where the Skybeam has kind of fizzled out on people, and that's what a lot of people were using.
Right.
Not everybody, like we're around the corner, we couldn't get that, but if you get an overwhelming number of surveys, the voluntary surveys returned from one area like there, what would that skew the results of the survey, or
that's why we're setting up
do you take that into account, or what?
Right, that's why we're setting up the Pitkin Connect, because I know that there's going to be more of that voluntary side of things, and I mean, it might skew in some areas, but I also know, Redstone, there's the Redstone Caucus, or Crystal River Caucus is very concerned about it, so I don't think it'll skew it any more than, is really necessary. And the other piece is part of the entire outreach plan in this phase 1 is also them reaching out to the caucuses and connecting with Kevin as well and some of the leaders of each caucus spearheading the broadband efforts.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, just going to each of the caucuses, because, well, if you look at Crystal Caucus, the Frying Pan Caucus, Snowmass Capitol Creek, they're all up valleys where the service is poor, and you can get a lot of feedback going to a meeting.
So the same goes for the Castle Creek, Maroon Creek, and Independence Pass. So we've got all those entities. And Phyllis and I know we've had meetings with the East of Aspen Caucus, and so I think by zip codes you can also break them down to see where your responses are coming from. So you'll see if you're heavily loaded in one zip code, you can weigh that from an area that had valid issues in another zip code area.
And the data points are coded if they're part of the caucus group, so we'll also know how those are broken up.
Okay. Any other questions for Kara?
And I'll talk to you more before I go to
Thank you very much, Kara, and we look forward to getting these surveys. Are these going to be in the mailed out surveys?
Yeah, they are all going to be mailed out. So.
But they can also go online to do one?
After the mail-in.
After the mail. All the statistical ones, the big heavy booklet, that's going to be mail-in and it'll be postage paid and everything. So
perfect.
If you get one, return it back.
It'll be important that online it says if you've received a paper survey, please do not fill in a second one. Can't help it if they do, but
exactly.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Moving on, we have preparation for the April 7th joint meeting with the City of Aspen.
Yeah, and I will apologize to the board. I have not had an opportunity to meet with my counterpart to discuss potential topics. So this is really an open discussion, I think, at this point. I know the board had expressed several ideas, I think, at the last meeting about a more open discussion around strategic goals. We also had the mayors participate in the panel discussion, which I think led to us, discussing a different way about having a talk. And I don't know if that's a place that the board wants to start, or if there's particular topics at this point that we'd want to consider.
The one topic I really think we should have on here is the state water plan. Public comments on the draft are due on May 1st on the current draft, and then when they release a final, there'll be public comments due again. But we've never submitted joint comments with the city, and I mentioned this to John Ely at one of our meetings not long ago, that we as Pickens County at the very least should submit some of our comments. And I would hone in on the IPPs, identify projects and processes that affect the Frying Pan and the Roaring Fork. Not as much the whole plan. Perhaps people do have comments on that. The city has had Mike McDill participating on their behalf. You may have seen some stories in the paper about the city's longer-term concerns about only having surface water supplies in the face of climate change and not actually having any reservoirs. And so they have water rights associated with those. But it's just very, very timely that we consider some joint comments, and perhaps John Ely and Cindy Covell, the city's water attorney, can talk about those in advance of that meeting and set something up. But again, May 1st is a deadline, and you're always stronger working together.
George?
I would agree with that. I think the challenge would be how do you present it so it's not overwhelming, too detail-oriented, to get to some sort of points that hopefully city could go in with us on. So how's that going to get orchestrated? That would be my question, because I think that's.
I agree.
Otherwise, we can just lose people in the weeds.
Yeah, I really think it'd be about having the two attorneys be able to work together and make some presentations, because the city is going to take advice from their water attorney, and
right, and so it would still be my concern in terms of how detailed that presentation is. And anyway, that's.
Okay.
But I would agree that's a timely topic and it's an important topic. The other, and that may take up the entire time, depending on what the city has. The other issue we had talked about that is timely as well is looking at some consistent regulations concerning beers and beer enforcement. And again, I would think there we would want maybe a short presentation, perhaps from someone like Kevin Wright, as a quick overview with some of the suggestions that he had given us to start a dialogue with the city.
And they had told me that they're going to be scheduling that. I just don't know if that
they have
happened or
it yet
not.
or not.
Yeah.
We can check in on that.
And then I believe some questions of housing were still, the housing regulations were still outstanding that may come back at this joint meeting too.
The, from APSHA?
From APSHA, yeah.
Yeah, the move up, move down
Right.
without having maximum occupancy to begin with is a big question mark in my mind.
And so that's, I actually just got an email from someone asking about that because a first reading is coming up in mid-April on that. And her comment, well, at least my question is, the first reading to whom? To the APSHA board or to city and county boards?
I haven't seen it on our agenda.
I think it would be coming to us, but I don't know that we have that scheduled, so I don't know if it's going in front of council first.
Right, so what does that first reading mean?
Yeah, they were going to finish refining that language based on our comments at the work session. We haven't seen that yet.
So we could discuss that and clarify that then. So that's more than the time we have. But those are all very timely, important topics.
Well, and I think the water plan may take up, I mean, even if we just have staff boil down to what are the key issues that they see for, you know, our community or the Western Slope or what have you, that could take up a good chunk of the time. Because that's a pretty dense document. Okay.
Michael?
Well, I think we need to settle on goals for the water plan and present those, and not go through a discussion of it, but go through an internal discussion with ourselves. What are our goals with the water plan? What are we going to endorse and what aren't we going to endorse? Present that as a fact to the city of Aspen. Say, can you agree with this, or do you have some modifications of this? Rather than go through the entire water plan. I don't think that's going to work at all.
So Michael, are you saying a discussion amongst yourselves first,
we can go to the meeting and say, here's our 10 goals for the water plan. This is what we'd like to see. And we think that it coincides with your goals. And let's proceed from there. Otherwise, if we have an open discussion about the water plan, that's not something we can actually do. I think that's not possible. So the other thing I'd like to discuss is, you know, we've had a long debate about the use of CMAQ funds, whether we buy electric cars or whatever, and my hope was that we could partner with the city of Aspen, combine those grants, and really come up with a substantial contribution to transportation, either the city of Aspen or, so whether it's a huge expansion of WeCycle or some other mode of transportation within the community, and we can partner on that. I think that's a worthwhile, just to state that goal to the council.
Steve?
Yeah.
I agree with Michael about we need to have the CMAQ discussion, but don't we do that we get CMAQ grants every other year?
Every other year.
So maybe we can put that on a future.
Yeah, each entity gets them in, you know,
Opposite years.
Opposite years.
So cities would be coming up in 2016? So we just did ours for 2015.
15. No, we did ours actually for 14.
Okay.
Yeah, and so 15 will be city, 16 will.
Well, it's not about actually doing it. It's about saying, can we agree to pool our resources over this grant and do something larger than we can do as individuals? That's all.
Yeah, and I think that could be a quick discussion. I've talked to Steve about that. I know the city is updating their sustainability plan, and they're looking at, what might be some technology alternatives in their transportation system. I think to the point that you're making, Michael, I think they're looking at, there may be some new technologies, whether it be electric or I forget what the hydrogen cell, I think, technologies, or they're looking at a number of different things. And so as they move along in that study, they'll be identifying those technologies that will have probably a significant price tag to them. So I think even you guys stepping up and just making a statement, we would like to partner with you guys on something bigger. You probably don't come to any conclusions at that meeting, but if you're comfortable making that statement, that'd be an appropriate place to do it if the board's open to that discussion.
Plant the idea in their head so they could be.
And I hear that's kind of what you're after.
Yeah,
really.
it's just, and on the bear thing, I think, we don't want to say City of Aspen, the bear problem is your problem. We want to say we have a complete bear problem. It stretches from the borders of this county, beyond, and throughout the county, and we need to come up with a systematic plan to deal with the preservation of bears within our community. And we think that we can get recommendations from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and we think those recommendations would be good for you too, that's all.
Well, Parks and Wildlife is doing that current survey about bears, so I think we're going to see something come out of that, because I just completed it myself. But on another note, I know we keep bringing up the entrance to Aspen, and this is not a discussion I want to have at this meeting, because water will flood the surface and we can't get to the entrance. But I just have significant concerns about the proposed changes to the Castle Creek Bridge and the narrowing, even though they call it softening, of the S-curves and the narrowing of the width of the bridge for vehicle lanes. And I think the last thing we need to see is anything that's going to further slow down traffic coming and going from town. So I'm hoping at some point, I don't know how quickly they're moving on that Castle Creek Bridge plan, but I just am really concerned about how that's going to affect the community, and that's part of a larger entrance to Aspen discussion. I don't know if that's better for EOTC or for the city, or whose hands that ball is in right now, but
yeah.
I just don't want it to be dropped. I want it to make sure that we do not lose focus on that, because it's going to come up, and we're going to, it comes up all the time. We hear about it.
We'll start reading about it in the newspaper before we
hear
from them again on it, probably. Rachel, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can agree with conceptually having a conversation about future CMAQ grants, but, it's important to kind of have a little bit of a unified front of what those potential projects could be. I think about in town, they used to have the Galena Street shuttle run in the summers, and now they don't. And, is that because they figure there's enough cycles, or that they just don't have the money in their budget for it? So, we could get into some very lengthy conversations about electric car chargers versus more cycle stations versus reinstating bus routes that go off in the off-season and people have to start driving again. There's just a lot of big topics out there. And so if we ourselves as a board come in with 3 or 4 different ideas of how we could use the city's money in the next go-round, or we should use our money and their money combined, unless we have, really fleshed out a proposal, I don't know how far that's going to go. And I think we made a thoughtful choice. There was some disagreement on the board about it last time. But I also am not entirely willing to say, well, let's give up all our autonomy in the use of those funds ourselves. We don't have the same type of resources and sales tax and others that the city does have, and it'd be good for John just to do more of the background information. Have they already programmed that? They have a 10-year capital plan, and probably every 2 years they put down, we'll be able to do something with our CMAQ grant, and so I'd like to see if that's really an open door and how we could be unified on that before we throw it out as a topic at this point in time. The other item was just kind of reaffirming. I think that if we were able to talk reasonably about bears and bring up entrance to Aspen in terms of making it an EOTC agenda item. Because it's everyone's involved, and we're going to have a new council come June that will just start to be getting their feet underneath them, and so you're going to have a real kind of limbo land there for a little bit while people are coming up to speed and reaffirming their board's priorities.
No. John, can we talk about the venue? I don't like meeting in City Hall personally. To me, it's like, this long table and there's people way down at the other end. And I don't know, have we ever met with the city council here, or do we always meet over there?
We haven't primarily because of the lack of space. I think we could fit the 10 of you around the horseshoe, but typically if we have the housing board or we have interested public, that starts to expand, because staff would typically take up most of the available seating, and our facilities just haven't been terribly accommodating. If the board wishes, we could try and do it here, or we could suggest another venue. Right now the library isn't available and the Rio Grande isn't available, so if we do seek out another venue, it'd probably be one that we would rent. And so that would be...
And that's my personal feeling, I don't know.
Yeah, the problem too is that there's no other place to broadcast live. Like the fire station meeting room might be big enough for us, but they don't have live grassroots hookup, right?
No, that's a pretty expensive, when we did that, it's a fairly intensive and expensive hookup. So happy to explore it. That's just been the limitation of our facility here.
George?
Yeah, it is a limitation, and hopefully in a couple of years we'll be able to host meetings over here. But for right now, given that we have public attends, staff attends, we want to make it so it's functional, and it is a long table, but it's not that long.
I agree, kind of. I mean, I totally empathize with what you're saying, but if the difference was renting a room and with the little now, not the little now, excuse me, Limelight. I just think we always have better uses of our contingency than that.
And we don't have live broadcasting.
Yeah, and the live broadcast is huge.
So, and I don't think we need to probably add anything else onto the agenda. This is like
we'll see what the
full
city
plate
has
right here.
Okay. But it sounds like the water plant, because typically what happens is the city's coming with some topics and then it gets too big, and it's sounding to me like the water plan right now is the kind of pressing discussion item, followed by the bears, and then we can look at if need to, CMAQ and interest assessment and such in the future.
One other thought, since if we're going to focus on those two issues, and they're really regional issues, would it make sense at least to think about inviting Town of Snowmass Village to support water plan? And I know that they already have a sort of
I don't think it hurts
I've been trying to get all of you together for a while, George.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask if they'd like to send a representative or anything like that. I really haven't seen them participating at the 1177 roundtables at all, and that's kind of unfortunate. They've been participating separately on other really good water efficiency and conservation efforts, but not at the state water plan.
Right, but it's interesting because I was watching a Snowmass Town Council meeting the other day, and I can't think of the new council member who's a member of Rockland. And he was saying to his fellow council people, this may seem out of our boundaries, what happens on Rudai, but it actually does impact us in terms of Brush Creek and things like that. So it may be worth reaching out and seeing if a council person would like to attend, and then perhaps we could get them to sign on as well as the Town of Snowmass Village for a water plan.
We should ask the city if that's okay.
Yeah, we should ask the city if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Good
it's
idea.
it's a small side item, but I noted last week, I believe, week before when I was homesick, you do a lot of reading, but the state is potentially pursuing acquiring a lease from Ute Water Conservancy, which is the Orchards of Grand Junction area, for 10,000 acre feet of water out of Rudai for augmentation of the reach, the 15-mile reach with the endangered fish. And I think that when River District and all were trying to get rid of the debt on Route I, they sold the last of the water that's available to sell. A lot of people shoring up their long-time supplies bought them. Ute Water is one of those. They don't actually need it yet, so they're going to lease it for the in-stream flow program to the CWCB. However, that raises a lot of concerns with the city of Aspen about the power generation, depending on when they call it and when they use it. And it also presents real concerns for us on the frying pan related to the high flow levels that will make it impossible to fish in August or September if it gets much more above 300 CFS delivery at a time. So I've contacted Mark Fuller on that issue, and he's going to try and get some discussion going with the CWCB about what some of our concerns for the health of the river are, not just turning it into a flume for deliveries. And then, of course, the city should be involved because of the power generation from Route I could be affected at various times, depending on how much they fill and drain Route I in the future operations. So that is coming up, and Mark Fuller is trying to schedule a meeting with John Ely and myself and some folks on that.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, on that. Moving on, Emergency Medical and Trauma Advisory Council and ambulance licensing process.
Another fun.
It's cleanup.
Hi.
Okay, Phyllis Mattice, Assistant County Manager, and with me is Richard Cornelius, who's the newly elected chair of the MTAC.
Welcome,
everybody.
Congrats.
And MTAC is?
It is the Emergency Medical and Trauma Advisory Council, which I've written an awful lot of times.
MTAC. This sounds like some kind of military acronym.
Well, through the process of helping process the ambulance licenses at the end of last year, I did quite a bit of research and discovered there's about 17 pages of county code that identifies how the MTAC's created, what it is, how ambulance licenses are, all the individual equipment that should be in an ambulance, which actually I believe mostly is through state regulation.
Correct.
But we've put it in our code through the past. And I actually probably should have put an ordinance in here because I went through all the history. MTAC kind of was created in 1997. It was the Roaring Fork Emergency Response Council. I forgot what it was called. There are still members on the MTAC today that have been members for 20 years, so that's really helpful. They can give us a little bit of information. But what we found is it is unwieldy. It's not needed all in the code. And this group of emergency responders and response agencies have been working together through all the years. One of the pieces of our code said the county is supposed to appoint members of the MTAC. I don't think that ever happened since the last ordinance was written. But this group continues on, does really good work. Save a Life Picken County is one of their main programs that they started, as well as educational programs for the fire departments, any other responders. So that's what they've been doing. And so the cleanup that I'm recommending, the MTAC adopted their own bylaws, which basically was some of the information that was in your county code. And then to write ambulance regulations for the county's part, how you oversee ambulance licenses and how that works, and to officially identify the MTAC as your recommending body for those ambulance licenses. Those entities have been doing the inspections on ambulances. They look at all the paperwork. They make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. So there would be that piece. So a new county code, an ordinance, and then the other piece is there's the Central Mountains Regional Emergency Medical Trauma Advisory Council, which Picken County is a part of, and the commissioners make appointment to that council, which you have not done recently either. But the chair of the MTAC has been representing Picken County And as many members of the MTAC could go, but we have to have one
Designated.
person in attendance. So we thought a resolution coming to you appointing the chair of the MTAC as the representative or their designee would be perfect, and that would take care of that requirement. So the board's real requirements are ambulance licenses and appointing someone to MTAC. So I've done a lot of research, contacted DOLA, contacted the Northwest Hazard region. Who else? Oh, the regional, the RETAC, the state RETAC people, and they're all saying, yes, you've got it. This is what the commissioners have to do, and any organization of emergency responders can create an organization themselves. They can create a local organization. And that's essentially what they've done through the years, even though there were some other regulations out there. So I don't know if you want to add anything about what you've done?
I think Phyllis covered most of it. MTAC is not required by state statute, but a RETAC is. So our RETAC is made up of 6 counties. Pickens County is one of the 6 counties of the Central Mountains RETAC. And then overseeing the RETACs in the state is SEMTAC. As Phyllis just mentioned, one of the things we wanted to discuss today was the MTAC membership. Currently the membership represents all of the agencies within the Roaring Fork Valley, including Aspen Valley Hospital. So in total there were 10 agencies that would be represented by MTAC. Ambulance licensing, we've kind of been handling that. 3 departments that fall under MTAC have been inspecting ambulances. We've been using paperwork that needs to be revised. Once those ambulances are inspected, of course, we present the paperwork to you and make a recommendation, and then of course the Central Mountains RETAC representation. So MTAC receives its funding from the Central Mountains RETAC. So for 2015, roughly $165,000 will be allocated from SEMTAC to the Central Mountains RETAC. As I mentioned, 6 counties make up the RETAC, and each county receives an allotment of $15,000. That $165,000, all of that is not allocated to the MTACs. It's actually up to the discretion of RETAC. Last year, for example, we received about $5,000. The funds are applied to a number of different things. One of those things would be education for the providers in the valley. As Phyllis mentioned, we also now will have oversight of the Pickens County Save a Life. Of course, much of that funding is by private donations. And of course, the big goal there is public access defibrillation, and then of course the CPR education to the members of the community. Clearly the bylaws and the Chapter 6, or Title 6, excuse me, is long overdue and needs some revision. I mean, for example, it sounds like the last time this was visited was in 1997, and if you reference the bylaws, one of the things mentioned on there is administering the required state emergency medical services plan and the annual subsidies and money. So prior to RETACs being formed, that was the case, but basically since 2000 when the RETACs were created, that's no longer a requirement. So that's just one example of why this needs to be overhauled.
So my question is then, the MTAC adopted the new bylaws that are current up-to-date bylaws and that address the issues in the county code. Now we need to amend the county code, clean it up, bring it back to the board for approval. Does the BOCC, I don't know if it's changed, still sit as the ambulance board? Okay, so that hasn't changed. Just didn't know if anything had changed in the last 4 years.
The Aspen Ambulance
Right,
District.
is actually set.
One member of the MTAC.
Right, okay. So, and then the BOCC needs to appoint someone to be the representative to the
Central Mountains.
Central Mountain RETAC. Okay.
So that would come to you as a resolution. So
Right.
to clean this up, you'd have 2. You'd have an ordinance revising the county code, and you'd have a resolution appointing.
And in the past, we generally recommended that the chair of the MTAC be our representative. Okay. Because I used to know all of this stuff when I was a member of SAHAC. So we got all those hacks out there somewhere. Great, thank you.
Good update. I appreciate the work that's gone in behind the scenes.
Right down to the Band-Aid.
So I noticed that just the differences between your new bylaws that you just adopted and our old land use code things, it's obvious that we need to do a lot of updating on our land use code part just to make it match what your new bylaws are.
Actually, it's the county
like
code.
the number
It's
of
just
like
a regular
the
county
quorum,
code.
the number of people who are supposed to go to the CM RETAC meeting, and however you say that. Different things like that, or there's a lot of differences. So.
I did a lot of work with John Ely just to make sure what was happening, that the commissioners were doing what is required to do. And then discussing what was actually occurring, we're meeting a lot of what was needed to be done. It just wasn't documented well. It had been going on by the good work of all the emergency service providers being dedicated and working with each other, and even the ambulance inspections. We have 3 ambulance services that are based in Pitkin County, so they each inspect each other, and that works really well. And it's been happening without any documentation. But the RETAC will also have the specific regulations, so you can look at what their process will be on how they would come to a recommendation to you. And then all of this Title VI will end up being about 5 pages of the particular parts that are responsible for the commissioners.
Come back to the board.
Yeah.
You know, it's like all the ambulance equipment that is supposed to be in there. That's probably changes periodically. Like there's new type of equipment that is added, and rather than have it listed on in the code, it makes more sense to have MTAC be in charge of it and just be given the authority and responsibility to keep the ambulance equipment up to the state standards, and that you can say that in 1 paragraph instead of in 3 pages or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, Michael.
We're not going to ruin this cooperation by formalizing it, are we? It sounds like it's a good thing already.
Yeah. Let's leave it alone.
So, will it actually help?
I'll let you answer that one.
I think so. I mean, it'll give us a clear direction, so.
But you already have a clear direction, you already have clear cooperation, you already have a good working relationship with all these members. Is this housekeeping necessary?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We could wait 2 more years and make it a 30-year or 20, what would it be, 20-year.
So does everybody give a thumbs up to that?
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty
Thank
obvious
you.
thing.
Nice to see you again so
Nice to
soon.
see you too.
So on April 7th, since we've been doing this, the resolution and ordinance are in waiting. I just wanted to make sure you had an understanding of what we were trying to move around before I just presented it.
Perfect.
April 8th is Wednesday.
Oh, April 8th. 7th is a Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks for coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just emailed John Ely because he was going to be coming down for the open discussion items, and we're running early.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have any memos of interest. Future agendas?
I have a, can I, John?
Yeah.
I'm going to be attending the Clear Economy conferencing they're having in Glenwood on the 2nd.
Yeah.
They're doing an economic development section in the afternoon, so I'm going to be attending that. And
I have an email.
I was
Charlotte
thinking
to
of
attend as
attending
well.
that too. Maybe we should notice that.
Okay,
that's what I was feeling. April the 2nd.
I might have to go to Denver to pick up Molly, but.
It's the Garfield County, what is it called?
Yeah, hold on a
Rachel?
second, I just have it on my
Energy Smart Conference.
Yeah,
Regional
here we go.
Roundtable
Regional Roundtable
for Energy Efficiency and
Efficiency
Economic
and
Development.
Economic Development. So
And
it's from 11 in the 11 p.m. Oh, that's the early bird
It's
price.
Thursday, April 2nd, and I'll probably be there for the lunch and then the discussion, and it's from 12 to 1. No, it's from like 12 to 2:30.
12 to 2:30. And there's an expo, so you can go first and see
In the morning from 8
displays
to...
and demonstrations.
I would put the time down from 8 to 2:30 in case we get there early.
Yeah, so right now, Patty, Steve, and Rachel.
Yeah, and there's a $10 discount on the fee if you register by the end of
I've already registered and have my
today,
tickets.
so, or get it to Charlotte to get you in there.
Thank you.
And I actually do not have any future agenda items right
The CCI summer conference is June 1st through 3rd, and that would be on our next, probably our next round of future agendas. So that overlaps on Tuesday work session.
Usually does. Is that in Keystone?
I'm not sure where it is, but it's usually on the I-70
It's usually
corridor.
somewhere on the I-70, yeah.
I think on June 2nd, I think is the...
Now, I assume Steve and Rachel, both of you are planning on
Yeah.
attending. Any other board members?
I, depending upon their broadband issues, if they have anything, I have to see their agenda to decide whether or not I want to take a venture.
Okay, so that'd be, obviously, if we lose a quorum, then we'll need to cancel any
Yeah.
meetings.
We'll have to
that
see
go
what
on.
days they're scheduling what.
So, yeah, might want to make it a lighter agenda that day or not have real important items on it.
I'll let you know as soon as I see the agenda.
Any other?
Anybody else have anything?
No.
You want to take a short break and I can round up John?
Okay,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
let's take a 5-minute, well, I don't know, 5-minute break, is that enough for everybody?
Something like that.
And then we'll just watch for, run into John out in the hallway. We have discussion of marijuana agenda items from tomorrow's meeting. So the way it reads on here. And John, do you want to fill us in on that?
Sure, although Jeanette is by far the expert.
Okay, well, Jeanette then.
But I'll tell you,
Delegate.
the two items that are up for tomorrow's agenda are an application request and a prospective code amendment. And they kind of came up pretty quickly, and otherwise there would have been a regular period for discussion. But as it turns out, things kind of precipitated at a different pace. The operation of the marijuana grow facility on the Holland Hills finds itself in a bit of a jam. And the jam is presented in an unusual way in that the facility is designed to the nines. I mean, no question about it. Jeanette and I have both been through it, and so have a variety of different inspectors, but it lacks in one major component part, and that is how to get rid of the waste material, which is kind of interesting, all things considered. It's like, building a nice big house and forgetting to put the bathroom in it or something. It's just strange. At any rate, so pursuant to state law, after you grow a plant and you harvest those portions of the plant that you intend to use in whatever manner, you have to take the balance of the plant, which is the majority of the leaves and the branches, the stalk and the root ball, and get rid of it. And it has to be disposed of in a way that it is not physically recognizable for what it once was. The method of choice around the state seems to be to take the material and run it through a chopper. It's sort of like a wood chipper, only much smaller because the material is not woody. It then mulches it, so to speak, and then you take that material, mix it with earth, and then it's good to go. And you spread it around the garden or just take it to a landfill, whatever you want to do with it. But until that process is concluded, you can't take the plant material outside of a secure location. As it turns out, there's no space, even as big and as nice as that facility was built, there's just no place to do it. So they're coming in for a modification of premises application, which of itself is pretty straightforward. They're under the gun with the application. That's why there was no lead up in front of the board as to the purposes of the why, the wherefores, and stuff like that. But nonetheless, the application has been appropriately noticed and is appropriately on the board's calendar tomorrow for action. What they're proposing is just an enclosure outside the back of the building, which will be fenced in and secured otherwise, where they can do this mulching and mixing process. And I imagine the board will have a variety of questions for the owners and operators, probably centering around the noise of the operation and odors. Just to name a couple. So beyond that, there is a potential code amendment. The code amendment is being put forward by Jeanette and myself, basically because the way the reg was originally written, we provided for modification of premises to be dealt with similar to a new license application. And my anticipation at the time was basically spin it back through, go through the entire procedure for any modification. My thought at the time was that any modification should be accompanied with a full review procedure, and chances are any modification would probably look like a relatively substantial change, just because of all of the hoops you have to jump through to get to that point. However, this modification is relatively minor. In fact, Jeanette and I can envision where a modification such as this might be an ongoing issue, just as a facility gets tweaked a little bit. When Jeanette looked at her liquor processes for liquor licenses, modification of premises is a relatively straightforward procedure. We thought about perhaps changing the review for modification of premises, but have elected to recommend to the board that it stays the same, such that it still proceeds through the BOCC, still has an opportunity for public participation, there's a noticing, publication and posting of the premises and so forth like that. However, what really stuck out at both of us was the filing fee, because this is treated under our current regs as a new application. The amount is really rather huge. In fact, for this particular event would be in the amount of $6,000. The amount of time that is reflective on the county's part through essentially us is nowhere near that value. The amount that is required of a modification to a premises associated with a liquor license is $150. So we feel that that amount is what's really appropriate. So if the board wants to entertain that, we have queued that up as well. The only way to do it, to apply to this particular request for a modification, is to set it up as an emergency ordinance so it becomes effective immediately. Either item, the board is free to take whichever action, thumbs up, thumbs down, or somewhere in the middle that it might feel is appropriate, but we figured given that there's a work session and a little bit of time to talk, we could come in and at least explain what it is without catching everybody.
If we didn't pass this, what would they do with the plant material? Do they have another place in the county to grind it at the place on the Crystal or anything?
Not for the volume that is produced by all the plants in that facility.
Rachel?
Yeah, John, you have to give us the guidelines in terms of how in-depth we can talk about this as opposed to during the regular meeting. Is this of a quasi-judicial character?
No.
Because it's not.
This is a licensing regulatory action, and the board is free to have as far-ranging a conversation with the applicant or any member of the public that shows up at the meeting tomorrow as you want.
Okay, and today, obviously.
And anything today, too. This, like I said, I just wanted to have a little
preparatory
conversation.
I just kind of wanted that reaffirmation of the nature of it. The one thing, I guess, I want to clarify, too, I can see the logic of keeping the fees commensurate with county work. This hasn't been a profit-making endeavor as much as to cover costs and cover outreach that the sheriff's office has been doing. I think when we talked about the license fees initially, there was some discussion of making sure they were reasonable and not piling on for multiple licenses in the same facility and so on. But what I'm wondering is if they are going through ComDev, they would separately pay any ComDev fees for an approval or sign off, or even coming to us if it needed to come to us as a modification of land use. So lowering the license fees would not affect the cost recovery from other departments that might have to review the proposal.
If there is not for this type of a modification, because it's simply, essentially it's a chain link fence with additional security cameras and locks and chains. So there's no ComDev review procedure. If there were, then that review procedure would fall into a land use process associated with a development review, which would have a separate fee schedule, and that however that lined out for the ComDev fees, that's what would be paid and collected. And ComDev fees, as the board knows, because you've looked at them just recently, they try to reflect as closely as possible the actual time that is put in, and then the cost to the county of processing such an application.
Thank you. That was my question.
I'll save my comments for tomorrow. They're more appropriate, I think, at tomorrow's meetings.
Okay, George?
So, John, this is an emergency ordinance because they are in full production now and they need to deal with the waste.
The application is what deals with the waste. The only thing the emergency ordinance does is reduce the fee. And that's it. And the only reason it's an emergency ordinance is because they need this application reviewed now so they know where they're headed with this production facility. And so it's going to be heard by the board regardless tomorrow. And if we wanted to reflect reflect a different fee schedule, then the only way to process it is through an emergency process or emergency ordinance.
And George, when they first filed the application and started talking to me, there was a little bit of confusion. They thought the whole property was licensed, and John and I looked at it. I went back to the meetings where the public hearings, the applicant went back to the hearings. It was very clear that just the facility was licensed, hence why we are here, because we don't have a provision for that fence.
Modification of the premise.
I was actually surprised by that also in reading through it, because part of the landscaping around there is the water containment thing to make sure that none of the water reaches the river from, so that's kind of like an out-of-doors operation pertaining to the marijuana growing operation in the greenhouse.
Nothing outdoors is going on related to marijuana, and nothing out of doors of the new facility, the new building that was constructed, is going on regarding marijuana. The landscaping, all of those types of issues were dealt with as part of the ComDev process that Rachel was just referring to as part of the development approval. So landscaping and watering and any other of those issues were dealt with as part of a development review process that allowed the construction of the greenhouse, period. And that covered the entirety of the property. But when the actual marijuana licenses regarding that property were issued, they were just the four corners, so to speak, of the building.
So maybe the drainage pond there just has to do with the fact that it's the building, the runoff from the building in a rainstorm or something needs to be dealt with, so it doesn't just
sheet wash into the river.
Run right into the river and, yeah.
Wastewater.
Yeah.
But not marijuana wastewater.
And one of the first red flags that went up to me was, oh, this may be an amendment to the landscaping plan. That was my first thought. That's how I think sometimes. And I talked to Lance Clark, and he said it didn't affect the landscaping plan for the property. So.
The only other question I have, and I maybe will ask the same thing in the application tomorrow, but what happens to the plant material? Is it going to Pickens County landfill and get composted, or what? Do they have to deliver it to the state, or what?
They don't have to do anything. Once it is rendered unrecognizable, which is the state standard, it can be taken anywhere, done whatever what you want to do with it. It's just of the nature of a compost or a potting material. So
no pun intended.
You can do whatever you want with it, but you can't do anything with it until it's rendered unrecognizable. And like I said, the going trend of how to do that, how to accomplish that task, is mulching it and mixing it with dirt, with soil. I mean, you could use it on site and plant petunias in it, or you could dispose of it at the landfill, although that would probably be too expensive, or you do whatever you want with it. You'll have to go into that with the applicant.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask them that.
And they'll be here tomorrow.
Well, with used medications, when somebody is deceased, they mix it in with cat litter. And then it makes it like, so nobody would ever want to use it for.
I wonder why all those high cats walking around. Jeez.
I came up with a new business, Happy Compost.
Yeah. If they were able to sell the Star compost from our landfill when it had to do with the sludge, I can't remember what the name was, but then they could certainly sell Colorado compost.
I can see this is a big business opportunity waiting for somebody. Composting operation.
Potting soil.
And I did ask the applicant that question, and they bag it up, and there's a service that comes and picks it up. And I'm not sure where it goes. They can certainly speak to that tomorrow.
Great. Thanks for the heads up.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Another handout?
Request for funding for Mountain Rural Philanthropy Days.
Yeah, and the board received a letter. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at this yet, but the Community Resource Center and Anschutz Family Foundation, both of Denver, have been hosting Rural Philanthropy Days typically, I think, on the western slope. This year it's going to be in Rifle and Garfield County. They've sent a request for funding. Nan Sundin from Health and Human Services has reviewed this and actually suggested the county's participation in sponsoring this event. I'll give you a chance to look through the letter. They have various sponsorship levels. Nan was suggesting that may be appropriate for the county to look at a summit sponsorship level of $1,000 to $1,500 that could either be drawn off of the board's discretionary funds if the board does wish to support this, or could be directed out of the Healthy Community Fund again if the board wishes to support this.
Speak.
Yeah, Rachel?
I attended one of these a few years back, and as John said, they only have them every other year on the West Slope. And the purpose was that the larger granting statewide organizations tended to focus all their grants on the Front Range. And they were far less familiar with both the nonprofits on the Western Slope and the work we do and the need for those. So just giving the letter that was put together, the amount of funding that goes to rural nonprofits has increased over 300% since the inception of this event. And so I think given the wide variety of regional collaborations we have with nonprofits in our valley, plus the incredible work that the nonprofits in our valley do for our community, for our citizens, supporting this at some level would be really important. I was choking a little on 1,000 as opposed to 500. 500 is kind of an easier. I'm sure if we did something in between, they wouldn't get upset if we did 750. But, I met, and it's a real face-to-face opportunity for people who are the chair people of the nonprofits to talk to the people who give grants, to get the advance of, what are you looking for? What are your narrow granting guidelines? How do we fit in those or not? It helps agencies not waste a lot of time writing grants for organizations that, it's not going to be a good fit. And then also kind of making that face-to-face contact with people who really will be a good fit. So it's a little bit like a college fair in that sense.
Yeah. And just as additional information, it looks like both Garfield and Eagle counties are sponsoring the event also.
I would hope Garfield County is sponsoring it.
Yeah.
It's in Redford. But John, you mentioned that we can look at funding this either through our discretionary fund or through the Healthy Community Fund. How would that work? Because I don't understand.
Well, there are some funds left. We'd have to bring an appropriation for, it would be a more onerous process. I just wanted to let you know there are funds available. This would be an appropriate expenditure out of the Healthy Community Fund.
Because wouldn't we have to reconvene the committee, or should we?
The committee is advisory, and so the committee is advised on the nonprofit grants. The board still has appropriation authority, and for a sum like this, if we're looking at $500 to $1,000, you're not obligated to bring that committee together, but you also you have not spent out your discretionary funds. Those are already appropriated. You could direct that today, and we could make that happen if the board so wishes.
And then this would be, at least Rachel, from your past attendance, would be probably attended by many of our nonprofits here in the county and the valley.
Absolutely, and it provides both a networking opportunity, and I think, Rachel, as you're saying, also a development opportunity in terms of looking at development strategies and how nonprofits can connect with Front Range foundations and those sorts of things.
And then is there Is there a registration fee that goes along with this?
That I do not know.
I don't remember that. I mean, they particularly have a dinner in between the two nights if they follow the same format as before, and they had asked local electeds to try to attend to be able to, you know, see the process and see the people. That's where I ended up attending. But most of the people come kind of from an all-day event that had been at a high school with various booths set up and tables and interview opportunities and things like that. So
It's a 3-day event, yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes what happens with these events, and George, I don't know if that's how this event is set up, I just don't have that information, is, you know, a fee will go up or down for participants depending on how much they can get in sponsorships and those sorts of things.
Well, I would support a panorama sponsor. I don't think a summit sponsor, I don't think we need to have recognition as Pickens County or signages, or we certainly don't have an exhibitor table. I mean, so I would support it, you know.
And out of what fund?
Well, listen to other board members. But I would support it at that lower level panorama, $500 level.
Michael?
Do we know what Eagle County and Garfield County are contributing?
I know Garfield put in 5,000. I did not have the amount on Eagle County.
I'd be a little more comfortable at 750, George. Just
yeah, well, that's fine.
Yeah, and I would say from our discretionary fund, in case we end up with emergency requests from Healthy Community towards mid-year or anything like that. That would be my preference.
Yeah, we could always put money into one of the nonprofits from the other fund
If we needed to.
later on if we need to hang on to that.
I mean, we've had years when we had to augment, say, Nan's budget for emergency assistance or something. So I'd rather do it out of our contingency.
That'd be all right with me too.
I think that's the easiest.
I'm okay with 750 out of contingency. It's a great thing, and I actually put it in my calendar. The only day I would be able to attend is the last day, but I just don't want to forget that it's coming up. I'm sure they'll send us out information so we can decide if any of us want to participate.
Yeah, it seems like we should notify all the different nonprofits that we.
Oh, they get notified.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe they do, but just to make sure that.
We have the POD group, which is the nonprofits that work with the Healthy Community Fund, and they'll certainly be aware or be made aware of the opportunity.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, we already have the email list from the Healthy Community Fund grant process that, you know, closer into the event, Mitzi could
We
put
could
out a
just send
reminder.
out an email blast saying Pickens County's putting some financial support into this, and we urge all of you to go and apply for some more funds, and maybe they don't need as much from us next year. Who knows?
Hard to say.
Or maybe they
Oh, I
get as
think-
much from us and then can do more for.
I think the event is more for nonprofits to show what they do rather than seek funding, isn't it?
Well, no, it's connecting
Is it
with,
funding
it's
too?
absolutely
meet,
connecting with the grantors,
Okay.
but showing what they do
Oh, then
and
that-
connecting
yeah.
with the grants.
Okay.
So, okay, very good.
Okay, and then the last thing, of course, our library project has begun in earnest. You'll see the fencing up there. They have started pulling the concrete back from the roof. We're going to have Jody in probably towards mid to end of April to give you guys a more thorough update on how that project's going, but they have started the work in earnest now.
Yeah. This is a funny kind of side question, but if you could check into, I'm kind of curious as to what parking passes the constructions have gotten. It just seems that down here on Rio Grande now, there used to be HOV parking and more parking, and whether it's the construction across Mill Street or the library, most of the surface parking really seems to be taken up pretty heavily by construction traffic. And that may have been what the city granted, and you know, I don't know, but it also could be a lot of people doing the 2-hour shuffle. And we're just about to see the ball fields start to really increase with kids soccer and things like that after school. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
That's all I've got on open discussion.
Are we doing? Yep.
Patty?
I'm going to bring back to the board because Kara and Phyllis have been helping me draft this letter of interest to CCI. And I just really need, you heard me say, I got support from the fire departments throughout the valley, the Aspen Police Chief, and from Joey DeSalvo to support my putting in a letter of interest for appointment to the FirstNet Colorado Governing Board.
Yeah.
It's a national issue, is this FirstNet interoperability for communications for public safety. It's kind of in a chaotic flux right now. It's been funded through the governor, so my travel time and lodging, if needed, would be reimbursed to the county. It's one meeting a month. It's the third Thursday, so it shouldn't interfere with anything. They may well choose somebody maybe from Adams County, since they already have a FirstNet program, but I think it'd be a great opportunity for Pickens County to also be in on what's going on with this FirstNet programs and with broadband. So I just need the board's support before I...
Yeah, I would be happy to support you in that, and thank you for volunteering your time and commitment. It's something that I cannot probably describe well, but I've heard others reference that this FirstNet and broader broadband does have a relationship, and sometimes the industry is trying to say, well, you don't need broadband expansion. Look, you have FirstNet, and or people who have FirstNet going, well, can't we expand our FirstNet to the greater community? So there is a point where those programs converge a little bit, at least in the industry's mind. The industry would like to say, you don't need to change Senate Bill 152, you have FirstNet, and it's like, well, yeah, we have our services, but our public doesn't.
Right,
and things
FirstNet
like that.
is dedicated, and correct me if I'm wrong, to public safety.
Yeah,
It's to create a specialized, for public safety use only, interoperable system for communications.
And then just,
right,
say,
it
just
just
keep your eyes
gets
out,
complex.
because the industry will try to say, well, you have FirstNet, and
Right,
it's
right.
like, but we can't use FirstNet outside of our government, or can we use FirstNet, or could we expand it, especially, and maybe not us, but some of these other communities that only have 500 people to begin with,
Right.
they're like, why not?
What was interesting
amplify
too
this?
is that I researched the locals, the state website for FirstNet, and I also went to the federal website, and I was looking through the organizations like NACO has a seat at the table, and NARC, the National Association of Regional Councils, has a seat at the table. And I happen to know that representative from my being on the NARC board. It's Steve Casano, who's now state senator in Connecticut. So that was a great connection to the national board that I could also bring to the board down here in Colorado. So we're kind of working that into the letter.
Very good.
Great. That's okay?
Yeah, and just for your information, they did a presentation on FirstNet at the CCI Mountain District meeting last summer.
Yeah, I've been trying
I
to...
think I have the material from it if
Great.
you're interested.
Yeah, I would definitely like to
That
read
might
it.
help you in your application to have their literature
Right,
to
and
read
that's
over.
why I pulled up all the sites, so it was interesting homework
I'll
to
see
do.
if I can find that. I think it's up
That'd be great.
in my desk
Great.
up there. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see, we don't have, do we have any other open discussion from anybody? Well, we don't have either one of our people for renewal interviews.
Here we go, door is open.
Yet. Maybe this is one
Yep.
walking in.
Good timing, Lonnie.
Come right up to the table.
Online.
Perfect timing.
Sorry, I just came from work.
That's okay.
My girlfriend did make me bring a clean shirt on. She was quite upset.
Good for her.
Yeah, that is good. Hey, George.
Your timing was impeccable.
Yeah,
Well, we were 10 minutes ahead of schedule and we're sort of wondering what to do next.
Oh, well, good. Trust me, I gave her the whole spiel this morning. I practiced on my girlfriend, but so I always have too much to talk about. So. Well, hi.
We'll let you take it.
Yeah, so Monty, I'll start talking. There are two boards that the commissioners like to interview the members of, one being the P&Z board and the other the Open Space and Trails board, because they're two very important boards to the commissioners, and so we like to have at the renewal time to have another interview with you, and it's partly to find out kind of keep tabs on how things are going on the Planning and Zoning Board, and if there's any way that we can make improvements, that sort of question. So when I was looking at through all the different list of renewals, I made a long list of things that different board members from all the different boards suggested, but do you have any suggestions that you would make for the Planning and Zoning Board specifically, for improving it or having it work better?
Well, you know, I've been on it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, I think. It's been a while. I really enjoy it, you know. I'm really kind of surprised at that. Even trying to read through, well, I'm not a big reader, but, you know, I'm a big thinker about things. And what I really, just to give you a quick synopsis of my reason for being on it and what I think is that, you know, basically my philosophy is a Taoist. So in Taoist, we try not to make any actual decisions. What we do is implement opinions and try to give a picture of a common good for everybody, you know, and that's kind of why I like the board. I feel we're there to kind of vet things out for you, and you're the people elect, you know, so you're the ones that have to make the hard decisions. I think that, you know, really what our goal is to give you the best answers from what we know from our experiences. And on the board, we have a really good mix of people. And I got to tell you, I just think the board's awesome. I don't know how much you've seen or watched what we do, but we get along really well. The things we disagree on, we actually find a way to we have almost unanimous votes on everything. And when we don't, we really respect that, you know. And that was the kind of thing that, again, my girlfriend said not to go into this, but this is...
Hopefully she's not watching.
Oh, that's right, sorry. She's not. But, you know, like, one of the things that I try to find, when anybody comes up with something, whether I agree with it or not, I try to find the 5 reasons why it would work, rather than the 1,000 reasons it won't work. You know, and I see this in our society today, I see it in our country, in the global, everybody does this. And you as a board, the same thing. We all have personal feelings about things. We have things that we'd like to see happen. And it becomes very personal, so it becomes very polarized in our society, in every group we have. I don't find that in our P&Z too much. We have them, but first of all, Mirta is a great chair. You know, miss John tremendously, but she does a great job of help bringing us to the end of that, you know, and not letting us get too far out of our cage on it. But the key is in anything, where do we want the future of our county to go? You know, what's our Tao of it, or the path that it needs to be good for everybody. One of the things I try to tell my clients and everybody else is what's good for everybody else is what's best for me. You know, in our society today and things we see is, oh no, what's good for me is best for everybody else. And that is it brings up all kinds of conflicts, so we never get anything done. So in P&Z, I'll find that we come up, we try to digest what you want us to look at, you know, and then, you know, I kind of come from a building point of view for 35 years as a builder here, and we have attorneys, everybody kind of comes from a different point of view, but we all have one common goal, is what's really good for the environment of the county and the people, what we want to do that feeds everybody. And then we all have different opinions, but we try to find 5 reasons why it might work usually. So that's kind of what I see for it, and I think the P&Z does that really well. Things to make it improve, I don't really know how you could do much better than what we do, other than, you know, we really love your direction of when we suggest something up or we do our recommendation to you. Again, what I like is we recommend. Your job is to make the decision, make it work, you know. Ours is like, hey, here's how it could work, here's what our thoughts on it is. You know, just understanding really more what you guys need and want to, because you're the pilot of the ship going down the county, right? And we're like the navigators and information and air traffic control and trying to vet things out. Break left. So those are kind of my thoughts on that. And jokingly, I say this every year, we should get 1,000% raise and free parking for the hour. My biggest problem is not getting a ticket the last hour before we go to P&Z. But really, other than that, I tell people I just think it's a great group. I really enjoy it. And just really let us know how we can serve you guys better, because that's what our job is. you know. And I'm kind of the Woody Creek guy, you know. So lately I've been trying to step into the caucus meetings, and I first let them say, hey, I'm on P&Z, I'm not here as a Woody Creek guy so much, but just to let me hear what you're saying so that when we talk about it, I have a pretty good idea of what you guys are thinking and stuff. So that's kind of my whole speech on it.
And the time commitment has worked okay for you? Because I know it can sometimes be really time committed, and sometimes it's not quite as bad.
As long as the area usually plan is done.
Oh, I know. I remember those days. And do we still feed the P&Z?
Occasionally we have little stuff. But
Yeah.
Yeah, we've started feeding again.
Okay.
There was a time there where we didn't.
Because when I sat on P&Z, instead of asking for 1,000% raise, we just asked for 2 sandwiches instead of 1.
That works. That's actually better than 1,000% raise.
And we never got paid parking either, so that was always an issue. And if we had more control over that, we would do what we could.
You know, it's pretty funny. I know Tom. I know the guys pretty well. I just pull up here last hour, and I said, Tom.
You are on TV.
Yeah,
you're on TV.
Well, I do.
So you park within your time constraints, we'll put it that way.
Absolutely, and they, you know, but it's, again, another thing in this town, I think that one thing I've always loved about living here is that, you know, there's rules and everybody has to follow the rules. That's, being a pilot, I understand that, but there's always interpretation of rules, and there's how to get along, and in the day, you pay what you pay, you know.
Yep.
I get a ticket, I go pay it. In the store.
It's right next door.
Yeah, and if you know, if there's something I don't really understand on P&Z about a rule versus what we're doing, then we ask questions, you know, and get answers. And I'll tell you the other thing I meant to say too is staff. We have an amazing staff, which you guys know too, that they really do a lot of stuff for us and give us really good directions. And we really follow their recommendations a lot. But yet we challenge them like anything else. But I think this board is a board that wants to make it work. We want to do that job for you, and we want to, and if we can lead by example and to the rest of the county, to the state, to the world, the global, is just how do we get things to work rather than just fight about what can't work. I can break down anything. I can tell you a million reasons why anything won't work. But strength is finding 5 reasons why it will.
George?
Monty, I think once or twice in the recent past, we've met with the P&Z to discuss some of these broader issues and direction. I think the last time we did it was perhaps during the WAP. Mm-hmm. And is that valuable, and is it, do you see any larger issues like that coming forward this coming year that you think we should be having a joint meeting?
I do, actually. And back to the time constraint, it's really not bad at all anymore. I mean, the ASB really took a lot of time.
Yeah.
But now, we've got less and less meetings, it seems like. And
That time of year, they'll start.
and I actually hold the record for the best attendance.
Oh, like that.
I didn't do that in school, for sure. You know, back to your question, I think it's really important to at least every once in a while have a gathering like we do and just sit and talk, or even have it more official, so we can understand more what you need, you know, to facilitate that. And the only thing that I found that came up that we didn't even have a unanimous vote on that I found really interesting was the special events stuff, you know. And we were really, I didn't think that would be that difficult, but there was a lot of thinking to be had about that as far as, you know, your rights as a property owner and wanting to have a party versus, you know, like my whole comment was, it's the guidelines to be a good neighbor is what we really want to come out of that. How do you put that into policy? You know, I don't know. You know, again, how do we make that work versus, you know, oh my God. I mean, we got a lot of pushback from the community on what do you mean you tell me I can't have a party? So that would be one, I think. A couple of things that we've never talked about, but is always kind of big in my heart. Is one of the biggest problems I think we have in our county is traffic again, you know, and how much people come up here to be able to work, and you want to be able to work here. And how do we keep constantly on our radar to what ways can we make that work better and better? It's actually seen the last year, and I don't know if the construction economy's down or this was down or whatever, but it wasn't as bad as 3 or 4 years ago in the last year or two. So what is that, you know? And,
Part of it could be the BRT being in place.
yeah.
That's made a lot of difference with people knowing if I miss this bus, there's another one in 15 minutes, and they'll use the system.
And it's a great bus system. I actually went down to get my car fixed and dropped it off and came back, and man, I was like, this
It's
works.
great, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, not only can I should text on my phone, oh, it's a great view. I don't have to drive. So
You're sitting up there high. It's pretty nice.
you said high. It's great, and it was pretty effective to get up here. But you know, in construction, we need to bring tools. We need, you know, there's some other issues with that. And one thing that just came to mind, I don't really think this is that relevant to you guys, but one of the things I was asking the natural gas people that, you know, how many leads do you have out to areas? And they're all, it's all, you know, based on, you know, how much money we can make basically, which just makes the world work. But one of the things I was thinking, how many propane tanks we run all over town, and more we can bring natural gas is the way of the future, I think, you know, for our heating systems. And if we can encourage source gas to, let's get more community areas under natural gas so we don't have to bring propane tanks and trucks up, might be one way. And other things too is, I'm thinking is like the intercept lot. If there's different lots where people can get there at least and leave their cars, which is nice and stuff, but all of a sudden overnight I don't have to take my car with me. But that's problematic in other ways, I heard. So I don't know, those are the kind of the things that I see out there.
Yeah, I was going to say that about the issue of the free parking while you're at meetings. Well, I park typically at the intercept lot or at the old Snowmass Park and Ride, and that's my free parking. And then I just ride the bus.
I take my motorcycle most of the time. It's cold today.
Yeah, but I realize there are times you would probably have your truck with tools in it, and
yeah,
you're in town already or whatever. So I noted that as, because you weren't the only one who mentioned free parking on recommendations.
It really is more of the 1,000% raising that is always an annual joke for me.
But the pay is so good.
Yes.
I mean, you get a really good feeling for being a public servant, and I think the least that we could do is somehow provide free parking when you're at your meetings, and
Well,
that's something we'd have to work out with the city, but
Yeah.
it's something we could discuss.
You know, that's contravening the whole goals of mass transit.
It
To say,
is.
hey, please park here for free, you know, and don't ride the bus. So I'm not involved in that conversation. I mean, I just can't see that, Steve. But I think that it would be reasonable perhaps for some people to approach the city and say, have you ever thought of an end of the day pass for just $2? And you can go in when they're still charging on the street side at 4 p.m. It's not the $5 a day. And have something in the garage, they get a little revenue out of it, and you have to be out by midnight or something, or by 2 a.m. So, you know, maybe the city could work to make even more revenue off their things by people like Monty who just need to do some business at the end of the day.
You know, that's a great point. The other thing I just realized that really kind of makes that moot too is now they do how many minutes you want rather than just the 2 hours. So that really actually makes it worthwhile because you can just, you know, you pull up at, our meetings are 5, you have to pay till 6, so I can just do one, okay, it's a couple bucks.
Yeah.
And so it's really seriously just a joke. So, but really, I do really enjoy being on the board.
And we thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for serving on that board. We appreciate your efforts.
Well, it's like I say, it's a good group, and you know, the other thing is I really didn't know much about that stuff, and it's over a period of time I'm gaining a little bit of knowledge about it and insight and stuff, and like I say, it's kind of a good forum to get a speak to occasionally. So,
thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Done that fast?
All right. Yeah, the clean shirt worked.
Clean shirt worked.
Yeah, the clean shirt, the conversation with your girlfriend worked.
Yeah, I'll let her know.
Okay.
Charlotte, did James indicate his?
I hear a door opening.
Oh.
Perfect, okay. It's like we stayed.
See you guys later. Thanks, Monty.
Yeah.
Thanks, Monty.
Hey, these guys are tough, man.
ready.
Yeah, we are ready. Both of you. I said the same thing to Monty, that his timing was impeccable because we were just sitting there starting to twiddle our thumbs and he walked in the door. So your timing also is impeccable.
Well, good. That's what we try to do. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are
So,
you?
James, I said the same thing to Monty. I'll say to you that there are two boards that the commissioners like to interview the applicants when they're re-upping for. And one is the Planning and Zoning Board and the other is the Open Space and Trails Board.
Okay.
Because they're both put a lot of time in and they're important boards to us. And we like to get your feedback is a big reason for having you come in so we can really get a feel for what's happening on the board, and if you have any suggestions on how to make things work better or any, so we get a chance for us to get your input too.
Okay.
So, yeah, is there, taking off of that, do you have any suggestions for how to make the board work better, or how is it going for you?
Well, it's going great. So I've been on 2 years. The first year was quite intense because we were working on the WOMP. So we met every week, and most often our weekly sessions would go long past our 5 to 7 scheduled time. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed having that long-term look at what we're doing here as a community, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And now we're working on a 10-year plan for the whole county, and we're not meeting every week. And you have my comments in your packet.
Yeah, we do.
So I may be the rare person who said that he thinks we're not meeting enough. Not everybody liked it when we met every week, but there was a lot more continuity, I think, to it. And now what happens is we meet twice a month. We try to meet on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, and often one of those meetings will get canceled because we have an applicant who's not ready, or we don't have a quorum. And I think now that we've gone away from meeting on a more regular basis, we tend to meet even less regularly than the twice a month that we plan to meet. So.
I would think that's going to change soon as the
say.
caucuses are starting to update all their master plans. That's going to fall on your plate, and that's going to probably get you more into a regular time frame again.
We'll be back in WOMP mode.
Well, and I have another question. Does the airport plans, will they have to come through P&Z at some point?
Eventually.
So, yeah, we got a lot planned for you.
Well, good.
Yeah, enjoy the time off.
And I did have one comment, because when I sat on P&Z, we had a lot going on at that time. We met a lot and extensively. And I agree with you, your issue about getting the packets earlier. We tried to accommodate that, and because of staff time and applicant time, we weren't able, that was the biggest distance we could provide the packets. And I don't think that that's something we might be able to change to get them sooner, because just of the time frames of getting them out. But because sometimes you get a packet and you're going, I have a lot to do between now and Tuesday. Yeah, it was a lot. And I just want you to know, I appreciate the time you put in. P&Z is a very, very critical commission for the Board of Commissioners. For you to be able to come back to us with recommendations, and we really do appreciate the time you put in.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, what is, you talk about, the question is, what are the top 3 issues currently facing the board? And the one issue you have is the Pickett County Long Range Plan. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
I think that's the update of all the individual caucuses.
All the caucuses, okay, thank you.
It creates our long-range plan.
Yeah, what do you call that?
I don't know. I would just say the update of all the master
plan
plans.
update, yeah. Yeah, I'd noticed that too, and I thought, well, that's what you meant then.
Well, it's done through
Master
long-range
plans
planning, it's
is
Ellen
what's
who.
being updated.
Well, and our 2 monthly sessions are divided between cases and planning.
Right.
So they always tell us, this is a planning session, this is a case session. And that's why I've gotten to think of it as a planning session.
Rachel?
Well, I wanted to thank you for giving us such complete answers on your form of what your experience has been like with P&Z. And it was a really...
I felt they were incomplete, so
Oh, no,
thank you.
no, they were a
I'm
little
glad.
longer than many.
Oh, good, good.
You know, it's awkward because when someone's term is up, you need to advertise for the general public, but yet you know the current applicants, people serving, have a little bit of a leg up on that, and so we've gone back and forth of, well, do we only interview the new applicant, or is that unfair to the existing? And let's interview them all, you know, in that sort of sense. So it really is very helpful and very thoughtful. I was just going to ask kind of, because this is a chance for us to get feedback on what we can improve or not, and what have been some of the real challenges you have felt in terms of public opinion? You know, we can watch all the kind of divisiveness going on in the city right now about what their planning and zoning has approved or what the council approved, but how do you feel, you know, in terms of the community temperature that you work with on these various proposals?
Boy, I don't think of that much. We have, on occasion, we have an issue that will come up that will get a lot of people attending. And a lot of people for us is 8 or 10, 12. But most times, the room looks like this. So, you know, we don't feel a lot of pressure from public opinion, but there are issues. I mean, the hottest issue in the last 6 months has been the permits for private party issues. And there were a lot of people at that meeting. And we had 2 or 3 meetings on that, and there were a lot of people at every meeting. But I think it was a good exchange. And it got a lot of ideas out, and it got us to understand the public sentiment on this issue more. And it got us to understand that there was a lot of public sentiment on it. I like it when there's feedback on some of these things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that actually, the feedback from the minutes from your meeting, which had the public's concerns expressed in there, really helped me to kind of clarify my thoughts on that whole issue. So I really used your discussion as a springboard for, you know, helping make the decision on that.
Good. Well, that was a tough one.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where you came out on it, but that was a hard one. And that, you ask for recommendations for what everybody could do to help us do our jobs better. That was one issue that it would have been nice if we had had more time to consider some of the issues, but we were kind of under the gun. You had hired an independent consultant to prepare a report. The report was great, it was very thorough, but there was a lot to discuss on that particular issue. And we basically were told, well, all of you needed to make a decision by a certain date, so we didn't have the luxury of postponing it for another meeting. And every now and then there are a couple issues that come up that you wish you had more time to consider. That was one of them. But I work in the construction business, managing construction projects, and I know that time is a luxury. Everything, it's like every single day decisions have to be made that can't be postponed till the following day. And you go through that too.
Yeah, I think in that instance it was that we had the moratorium was coming to its end date, which I guess we could have let the moratorium
and other people planning their
expire.
summer events, so too.
Yeah.
You know, was the other
So
pressure.
we could have let the moratorium expire. Somebody could have done a whole big project after or a whole big party and hold another big wedding or something.
Yeah,
Could have happened. So I think that's why we felt under the gun to have that be our date that we wanted to get the thing done by.
Yeah, we understood. We understood the time constraint, but did not want to make any hasty decisions on that, since there were so many people at those meetings.
Right.
They were almost all universally opposed to it. There was nobody there in support of requiring permits for private parties.
Well, I think there was a lot of misunderstanding, and at the end of the day, thanks to the efforts of P&Z and the discussion, I think it worked out well. We kind of split it up a little bit based on the moratorium, what could move forward, what we had to address. But I think the discussions that started with P&Z, and then, because we heard from a lot of people too, but I think that the end result was really good. And we were able to move it forward with not a lot of dissatisfaction.
Good.
So
Well,
far. So far, anyway.
A lot of it had to do with the charts.
Yes.
You know,
Oh,
what
it's
the
tough to
appropriate
read.
levels
Yeah.
were and what the appropriate criteria were, because there wasn't anybody who came to that meeting from the public who disagreed that that big party on Aspen Mountain last year should have required a permit.
Right, right.
Even the guy who owned the land.
Yeah.
So,
Well, at the end of the day, it worked out. So far, so good.
good.
So I have to tell this quick story, and I hope the rest of the board doesn't mind, but I was looking in my dad's book, and he served on the Planning and Zoning Board at one point in his career, and he said, as the way he tells the story, he was driving down the road and there was a bunch of people with cars parked, and they were doing a site visit somewhere, and so he stopped to visit about something or other, and then it was the Planning and Zoning Board on a site visit. And then he found out the next day that they went back and decided to appoint him to be on the Planning and Zoning Board. And he hadn't even applied for the
So never stop on the side of the road unless you're prepared.
So that was kind of, one step in his going ladder of doing public service.
That's pretty funny.
Very nice.
We do things a little differently now.
You mean applications?
Yeah.
Formal applications.
But thank you for your time. It's an important board, and it does take a lot of time, and you do learn a lot. I know you do, and we appreciate the time you put in.
I enjoy it.
That's good. Good to hear.
I learned more about the rules and regulations than I probably
Ever
ever
thought.
wanted to know.
I remember saying that too.
Okay.
Anything else?
Other comments?
I think
Well,
it's
thank you
great.
so much for
Thank you.
serving on that board. We really appreciate your efforts.
Okay.
and
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
in.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
feedback. too.
Thank
you
you for
very
the
much.
opportunity to serve.
Thanks.
This is the most civic thing I do.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have review of citizen board renewals, and Charlotte's here.
Charlotte, Jim Shancy. We email back and forth. It's nice to put a face with the emails. Well, it wasn't so tight when I told them I was going to be teaching today. There was just no way to make it work. I teach skiing part-time during the winter, and this is the busy season right now.
Spring break.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, it's citizen board renewal time. And I wanted to clarify a couple of things on page 2, the summary of renewals. Lisa Baker, there's not an application in here for her. She just decided at the last minute that she would go ahead and renew, but she was on spring break and she could not get her application in, so she will be submitting that when she returns.
Did you say Lisa Baker on the FAB?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, we're on Senior Services Council. It says first term there. Those are the folks that are completing their first term, but now that we're going to 4-year terms, there won't be a need for 2 terms on those. So
So are these ones, Now, in order to get a staggered board on the senior council, and we have 4 vacancies because of the 4 people who couldn't, had to drop off because of the term limit. So we'll be appointing 4 more people, hopefully at sometime soon.
Correct.
So are these people going to be serving the 4-year term, and then when we get new applicants, would they only be doing a 2-year term in order to get it staggered, or how are we
No,
going to
if
do
you
that?
look in the new term expires column of that page,
Okay,
you'll see that there are 1 3-year term and 3 4-year terms. And the ones that are vacant, I will manipulate to make those staggered as new members come on.
Okay.
Okay, so.
So this is starting that process, and then we'll continue it when we
Right.
get more applications.
And there are several boards that you'll see have 2 and 3-year terms, 4-year terms, so that we can get those staggered. That will happen again next year as well. So that we can, as we implement the 4-year terms, they will be correctly staggered.
Okay.
Okay.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for compiling this, Charlotte.
amazing.
It's a tremendous cleanup and, you know, in concert with our newly passed term limits. It's really nice to see this. The one I'm asking about is we have the conflict committee pool, and that's different from the conflict of interest board that was eliminated in the November?
It was not.
It wasn't eliminated.
Oh, okay. I thought that had
No, that
been
one
done.
didn't, that one, yeah.
So do we need to start advertising for more people via our charter for names to fill in that column?
We are continually advertising.
For them.
And there's not a lot of interest,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because they never meet.
Yeah. You know, this is just an idea for the board to think about or discussing later, but perhaps we should make it that almost like a jury pool where you get a mailer and you have to show up and help when there is a jury, that we ask our other board members that, you know, would you be a member of the conflict pool if a need arises? And, you know, they're already familiar with Robert's Rules of Order and some of our basic code of
Good idea.
conflict and things like that, and kind of have a de facto pool ready to go forward if we really should need it, something like that. I had thought that passed for some reason, it changed, I just hadn't heard anything about it since.
That's a good idea.
That's something I think we should look into. I'm not sure how we would go about it. We'd have to probably create another provision, right, to allow that to happen. And
Well, actually, I believe that is the way that
they were thinking about
they were originally set up, is that this pool would be
Ready.
available and ready.
Well, that was
But
the
they don't
pool of the conflict of interest, but she's saying the pool of all the other committee members, citizen boards.
Yeah,
We
maybe.
could use those people from those boards to fill in.
But maybe we could ask him, send a letter and ask, would you be willing to serve should a conflict arise? One
We have to
hasn't
find
arisen
out how
in the
we-
past 5 years, but the voters said no, they don't want to eliminate this. Would you consider yourself a potential candidate for that pool?
Yeah, we'd have
I'll
to-
let you and John work
So
it
it'd
out.
be,
Yeah.
so for example, anyone appointed to any one of our other boards, would they be willing to be on a pool that could be called up quickly, should there be a conflict of interest?
It's worth looking at.
Yeah. And
That's a
let
good
them-
idea, let us look into that.
Yeah,
and
we're
make sure
reaching out
that-
to you because you're already experienced, familiar with Pittman County's Code of Conflict of Interest
Patty?
laws, blah, blah.
Yeah. First, Charlotte, you are amazing. You are amazing. This was a lot of work. You do an amazing job, and I want to thank you. This is so organized for us to look at and to be able to just flip through and read these, so we really familiarize ourselves with the people that are renewing their appointments. I do have a question, because I ran into Joe Craybarker the other day and talked with him about just family and stuff. Did we interview him yet for P&Z?
No. he's
Okay, I'm good. Now,
scheduled.
did I
think
see
it
him
says
here?
there that he's, oh, it says on the first sheet.
Okay,
that
oh.
he is,
So he's, here, down here. He's
the
coming in on the
7th.
7th,
Yeah, he
okay.
couldn't make it today due to a trial.
So we've interviewed 2 of the 3 that are up, and then Tim McFlynn is the only one on Open Space and Trails
Correct.
that we needed to interview.
And then Healthy Rivers and Streams will be up in September, so we'll come back.
Steve, that's the other board we do interview the members, so there's 3 boards.
There are
P&Z,
3.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm good, because I just know we have some appointments we really should make and move on, but
Right,
like all of these.
So Joe will
He'll
do
be
him
in.
as a
We'll do him
separate
special.
resolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of brings the question back to our board of, other than Joe Krovacker until we've had a chance to interview him, would we like Charlotte to prepare a resolution of reappointment for all these folks who we've had, and also say the new one, the
Lisa.
nice lady, Lisa Cantner, who we interviewed the other day.
And that's why you did not receive in your Wednesday packet a resolution?
Yeah, because we have to.
Because we hadn't discussed this, and so I can change that if you need to.
And then at the same time, do we need to do a resolution for all these other people that are renewing?
Yes.
So we need to do one for all of these names in here, unless any of those we chose to individually pull out and interview.
Correct.
Which in my looking through, I don't have any individual ones, but the board may have somebody they want to pull out and interview. But I'm comfortable moving ahead with those we've interviewed, including Lisa, and with the rest that have been reapplying at this time.
Yeah, me as well, also just waiting till Joe.
Till Joe, we can do Joe
gets
special.
interviewed. We'll do him as a single. Should
Yeah.
he be reappointed?
I read all the applications, and there's nobody there that I would say that we need to bring them in for an interview. I am curious about, did we ever hear from Jim Lewis on the
No,
Weed
I
Advisory Board?
Have not heard from him. I
And
will.
at this point, we wouldn't reappoint him unless we actually specifically hear from him.
Right.
Then we'd have to do a separate resolution to
Correct.
reappoint him.
Can you give him a call?
So I can, if it's okay with the board, I'll prepare that for tomorrow and have it ready to hand out to you at the meeting.
So we can do it tomorrow? That'd be great.
So, Michael?
Yeah, I'd approve the list. I wouldn't be in support of Tim McFlynn. And I've talked to you before about this, that the Open Space and Trails Board doesn't have a term limits on it. It needs to have a term limits on it. They just need to have change on that board. And one of the ways to incentivize change is to have term limits. So some people have been there way too long, and Tim's one of them. So
I would move to reappoint Tim, though. I feel like he does a good job. And I'll tell you, when I look, whether it's at the State House or anywhere, I'm not a big fan of term limits. So I think when someone's serving well, you're appreciating their work, they know what they're doing, you think about whether you want to reappoint them or not, or whether you want to reelect them or not. And so I, for one, would want to move Tim's name forward on the sheet tomorrow. But I can respect Michael for saying that and believe in that's just a different point of view.
well, yours is a different point of view. So it's,
Yeah, from mine, that's what I meant.
I support reappointing Tim. So there's two.
I would move forward with all the renewals and the new applicant.
So we'll see you tomorrow.
So,
Another heads up on tomorrow's agenda, you'll see that this resolution comes at the end instead of the normal consent, because we needed you to approve the 4-year terms, which were delayed because of the website.
Okay, right.
Charlotte, just so you're aware, I started writing down the suggestions that everybody was writing on their applications for how to improve the board or whatever, and that's the list I came up with, which is a mess. And I think at some time we'll probably, I'd like our board to look at all these responses from the different applications and see if there's anything that we want to change or accept their ideas. But at that point in time, I think it would be good also to get ideas from you on, like one of them had to do with electronic renewal for the citizens boards was what one person wanted, or they had, I remember struggling with that myself at one time.
Right.
So we'll probably want your input on how to make the
I just print it out
process
and
work
bring it in.
better and.
Okay,
So
yes. I'd be glad to participate, and it might be a good idea to just maybe meet with the liaisons too. And there are other issues
right.
of the board, so.
It's a good idea.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Okay, is that the last thing on for today? Does anybody else have anything else?
No, I just note, I think the representatives from Old Snowmass are going to come in again tomorrow morning to talk about, or afternoon at the beginning of the meeting during public comments. So
Public comment.
may want to be prepared. It looks like they're circulating emails. There seems to be some impression that we're considering a specific project and they're wanting to be first in line. Which.
And I know also, well, the horse people are, I think there's going to be a bunch of them here tomorrow too.
For the glacier leashes?
About the glacier property, and horse trailer parking.
So we may need to just revisit kind of where we're headed with that in the morning.
Okay.
Okay, I'll wait till.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This session's adjourned. We'll see you all tomorrow.
The big thing is going to be for you to be able to explain